live. All right, welcome to
Hey,
Liquid Swan channel here. We're chatting with a couple Redditors. Crippled Assassin, uh,
yo,
his buddy Wizard, and Post-Scarcity. I always
Yeah, or Saxman Steve is my Reddit name.
or Saxman
Yeah.
Steve. Yeah. Uh, also, I'll start off. I'll get Saxman. Maybe I'll get you to introduce yourself, and then we'll move on to Crippled and Wizard. So go ahead.
Well, I'll introduce myself. I'll try to do that in a way that doesn't dox me too much. But basically, I'm a
Oh, of
a
course.
student a student of the wizardries of the empirical method and the scientific methodology. I'm currently a second year PhD student in cognitive neuroscience, but I do have a large interest in all things philosophical. So I do have quite a bit of a background and a personal interest in understanding philosophical questions ranging from politics to the nature of the mind to what it means to believe in God, whatever you want. It's all very stimulating for my senses.
Hmm.
Anyways, that's me.
All right, very good. Okay, Crippled, do you mind introducing yourself a bit?
yeah. Right around 2015, I started realizing that I wasn't doing enough to stimulate my mind, and that I wasn't living up to a certain potential. So I started asking myself some of the hard questions. I just kind of followed the breadcrumbs. I'm just following a path that I like, and I hope other people, enjoy my view of the world.
Is it very nice? And Wizard?
I'm Wizard and Aberman. Occupy. We're hacking the fucking world.
Very, very nice. All right. So Liquid Swan here. I identify as a classical liberal, free marketist, Austrian school economics. That's basically it in a nutshell. I enjoy Jordan Peterson's work, amongst others. How about you there, Saxman? How would you? Don't want to put a label on anything, but if you could, for the audience.
I mean, politically, I identify as a socialist.
Okay.
So, I mean, yeah, that's generally the broader term I'd like to use. My general belief though is a utilitarian one. So, my goal in a political sense is to maximize the well-being of everyone on the planet. And I personally think that through a socialist political ideology, that's the best way forward.
Very nice. And let's hear from you there, Assassin.
Yeah. I tend to look at what's around me currently. I want to break down the system that I'm uh, able to interact with, if you will. And so I'm more of an independent. I've grown up as a Democrat, but I really understand conservative. The conservative frame of view. I really understand it's trying to achieve, and I look at the systems that we've had in place and capitalism and how it's worked. And I mean, I can't honestly say that it's really failing us. I think that the reality is that we're failing ourselves. We aren't taking enough accountability for our actions, and that's why I really liked Jordan Peterson. His views on accountability.
It's like personal responsibility and those sorts of things.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. And how about Wizard? How?
I advocate for mass extinction and the children and the meek inheriting the earth, because that's the only way you're going to construct a new society.
So would you
So
say?
we got
Yeah.
Ted Kaczynski's in the crowd, I hear.
So would you say you're a market
No,
extinction?
I
Are
just
you
believe
market
in
extinctionist?
refractal repeating patterns. I just believe in refractal repeating patterns and history repeating itself. At the end of every age, there's a shedding of the old age and a new fucking solar messiah. All right, so that's going to happen here pretty soon.
All right. So I thought for the first little bit, me and Sax have interacted a little bit on Reddit. Not necessarily always positively, but we're going to be very polite this time. So hopefully, that I think that will add to it.
Yeah.
So one of the things I was interested in talking about was well, I get a lot of pushback on Austrian school economics because it's based on a priori logic versus, say, the empiricist model that you might like attribute to Keynes or MMT. So what do you have to say about the Austrian model, and what do you find it shortfalls? Sorry, that's the Sachs.
Yeah. So, I mean, the way I approach any natural phenomena is the way, that we've always done it in terms of like, the Renaissance ideals, right? So the way you approach any natural phenomena, you first, you gather your senses, and then you try to organize what you experience in a systematic way. And then you try to, as best as you can, form a hypothesis about what is going on, and you try to isolate some variables and build a better model of what exists in the natural world, right? And so my problem with the Austrian school is that it rejects that model. It says that the best way to understand economic phenomena, which is phenomena that is related to how humans distribute scarce resources, it says that the best way to understand how those phenomena work is not by understanding the world through a material lens. Rather, it's through looking at the world through a mathematical lens, right? It's through looking at a world of formalized systems of propositions, whether something is true or false, independent of the empirical or the material world, right? And so for me, the question that has to be asked is, you have to justify a deviation from the sciences. It's not the other way around, right? The burden of proof is on the Austrian school to demonstrate why the empirical method is, is not useful in the economic sense. And the problem I have with that is that no other like social sciences are able to do that, right? There's not another social science that has a consensus of people saying we should abandon the scientific method and adopt a mathematical approach, right?
Well, I have to push back on the abandon the scientific method. It's not that Austrian school doesn't reject science.
I mean, it rejects the scientific method to understand economic.
No, it rejects empiricism, but it does it for a reason, because you can't measure the future, right? It's logically impossible.
I mean, but that's not a criteria though for rejecting empiricism, right?
Yeah, prediction. No, it is. What is empiricism?
I mean, empiricism is the scientific methodology, right? It's a way of inferring things about the natural world using our senses and the natural world, right? Like,
for sure, yes. But how do you measure things? You have to measure things for it to be empirical, right? That's what empirical data is. It's a measurement.
Yeah.
Well, you can't measure the future.
I mean, why would you have to measure the future?
Well, otherwise, because if you're trying to make predictions for the economy or economic outcomes, you're going to have to.
You can. Again, you can make. Again, this is called the frequentist school of statistics, right? Like, this is how predictions. Like, for example, if you look at basic sociology, they make predictions too, and the way they make predictions is like what the empirical science economics do also, right? They look at the data, they compare different groups, they look at, for example, the distribution of data sets, whether there's any anomalous data, they try to control for it, they use alpha levels. So, right, to what degree, for example, is the group difference due to something beyond just a chance occurrence, right? So there's all these statistical models we use to inform economic models using quantitative data, right?
You're not measuring the future, you're measuring the past.
Yeah, you can only measure the past.
Yeah, but no one claims to measure the future, though, right?
Nobody's making a claim about measuring the future.
What good is exactly. Okay, but what good is an economic model if it can't make predictions for the future?
I mean, it can make predictions for the future.
No, the empiricism can't, because it can't measure it.
I mean, obviously it can, right?
Empiricism makes measurements about the past and forms a hypothesis about the future.
Well, which is what you call a normalcy bias. It's actually not a prediction.
Well, so again, you just look at any basic economic theory, right? So, for example, you look at the hypothesis of the network effect hypothesis, right? And so that hypothesis isn't based off just people doing a priori logic. It's based on empirical evidence, right? We know from history that when a market has inelastic demand and supply fluctuations, that the added value to that market, it disproportionately affects a small actor in the market, and it creates monopolies, right? So we know that not because of a priori things. We know because there's a documented list of empirical evidence saying that this is true. So again, and
then it uses a priori logic to actually form the decision.
No, the network effect hypothesis is out there, and it's just waiting to be falsified. But as of yet, there's no evidence that falsifies it.
Well,
what I'm saying is that, like, if you're talking about empiricism, is that you use statistical data, information and measurements about the past to form a hypothesis about the future, and you use a priori logic. So it's combining both a priori logic and empirical data.
That's more Chicago school.
I mean, but again, you have to make a difference between, because you can make inferential claims based off evidence. That's not a priori logic, right? A priori logic is devoid of any empirical claims.
Okay,
right?
Well, no, I'm saying that you use that, but you use that a priori logic, in conjunction. You end up with empiricism. You're not just using empirical data. Like, you don't just follow the data stream. Then you have to make judgments about how that data is going to affect the future.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. The data
is priori logic.
Yes, the data is interpreted through the lens of the scientific methodology, and the hypothesis itself is a sort of a reasoning that's inferred from the evidence. The evidence itself can never make any claims, right? It's up to us to interpret what the evidence means, right? Yeah, but again, this is what I'm saying. I'm saying the best way to interpret data and to make these types of normative claims is through a scientific process. And
what I would say is that the Austrian school is a scientific process.
I mean, but you'd be an exception, right? Like, no one believes that.
No, it's like there's economic science, So, anyways, but let me use an analogy to kind of get my point across, because I don't think I did a good enough job before. So, imagine, okay, so the future is unknown, right? We all agree.
Yep.
Because no one can travel forward in the future, take a measurement of it, and then come back. So the future is technically, logically unknown. So
I don't know. I'll let you finish, but I just want to say that, like, the future is unknown, but like, we have very good evidence of, like, probabilistically what would happen in the future, right?
Well, you also you have a normalcy bias, which is like things will continue as they have. That's not really.
Yeah, but that's not
really science.
I mean, that's not really a bias, right?
It is.
I mean,
you are biased that it's going to continue the way you've measured in the past.
No, but you're making a judgment call. You're not just following it and strictly dogmatically following that logic to the next.
Yeah, but the judgment call the judgment call is basically a normalcy bias. Even if you have it within a wide range, it's still.
But you could equally say that the normalcy bias is just normal variation within the distribution of data, right? I mean, it's just like it depends on how do you want to like understand the phenomenon, right?
Yeah. Okay. Well, let me use my analogy here and see if you guys can break it down afterwards, just so to get something to talk about. So imagine you're driving down a highway you've never driven down before, right? So, but all your windows are blacked out except for the rear. This is supposed to represent you can't see in front of you, and looking out your back window is like you measuring what you've just experienced. So let's say you can use your rearview mirror and it's perfect, so you don't have to worry about like the delay of you looking at the mirror then looking whatever, even though you'd probably be looking at the mirror the whole time. So anyways, you're driving down the highway and all your windows are blacked out except for the rear. How cautious must you be to successfully navigate this highway without being able to predict the future and not crashing into things?
You want to know my answer to that?
One foot in front of the other.
Look, you stop the car, and then you try and figure out the best method you can to unblock as much as possible in front of you.
Oh, but
maybe you can only make a small hole.
No, you can't. Dude, the point is you can't, because the windows represent the future that you haven't been through yet.
Yeah, but we're using technology all the time. Why do you think we have advanced tornado and hurricane warnings? Like, those come from years and years of meteorological data and the analysis of them.
Yeah,
we have to make judgment calls if they're going to make a turn to the left or the right every once in a while, and that doesn't come from just looking directly at the data and inferring the next
No, but
step.
you're
Like,
looking at other things, and you're like, okay, well, if we know that every time the clouds do this in the satellite, we know that this happens, or every time the
see,
pressure changes
what I'm
here,
saying
this
is that
happens, usually afterwards.
you're painting empiricism in a real straw man argument.
No, I'm talking about
I'm
economics,
just
not
trying to
about.
figure out how to escape just do elastic
Just remember,
stimulus
but just remember this.
simulation.
Just remember, guys, we're talking about economics, not about other stuff. So when you're talking about shooting rockets to the moon or whatever, you can do empiricism. But when it comes to economics, it doesn't really work for predicting the future.
Why not? How is the stocks not doing that currently?
Well, you can't, like, let's say you shoot a rocket up. There's always a chance, like, you could have a problem, even if you get everything perfect, because something might happen that you didn't expect. With economics, you literally can't predict the future. Like, you can, but it's always a guess. And
Exactly, but that's why we shoot the rockets. Like, turns out that the physics of the rockets happen to be a little more stable than the physics of the markets. But the truth is that we still make predictions on it based off of empirical data that we've gained over decades.
Well, with economics, the problem is every person is a node that changes the system, and
Doesn't matter.
You can't really.
We're interacting with it currently. If I'm not mistaken, you're interacting with it directly, and you're having to make judgment calls based off of the models.
Yeah, and it's always wrong.
I mean, but you're still doing it.
It's like trying to, well, yeah, but I mean, at the same time, I'm basing it on certain principles, I'm not taking, like, the measurement of yesterday is not going to tell me anything about tomorrow. Like, it just doesn't
What I'm
work
trying
like
to
that.
figure out is where are you going to find this government that have scientists and engineers trained to say to solve problems in power to make these decisions? Because, like, from what I can tell, we just base everything on what some good old boy in fucking Washington that go voted in.
Oh.
So, like, where is this government that has people in power that actually looks at the numbers and makes decisions based on the scientific fact and rule? Nowhere.
Well, the thing is, it's like with economics, you can kind of distribute this decision making, so no one node takes on too much damage when there's a failure. But with the government, you give them all the power. There's no way to overcome that. You're just gonna you could crash the whole system if the government's if it's too powerful and too centralized. So with economics, it's a good example of where you can leave a distributed model, and it's probably better off. It's chaotic. It's hard to measure, but it seems to work.
I mean, I don't think that's true, right? If you look at the history. Like, the history of economics is mostly like there's more stability when there's more centralization, for example, like monetary policy.
No, well, I just have to say no to that because, well, you know about the 1929 depression, obviously, right?
Right.
Okay.
But that was mostly due to unregulated markets.
No, because there was.
Yeah, it was.
No, I can give you exact.
It started
example.
on rumors.
No, I could tell you an exact example of where this happened before, right before it, after World War I in 1920, 1921. There was a massive depression, and it lasted 6 months. It was actually a bigger depression than the one in 1929, but the government at the time took no action. And so the rules essentially stayed the same, and it was able to recover within 6 months, versus the 1929, when it was... beforehand, the government had changed a bunch of rules, and that caused all these incentives to change, and that's when you had the 1929 crash.
Yeah, but I mean, again, this is like very common knowledge, like in monetary, like economics, right? Like one of the reasons, like the primary reasons for why there's like crashes and bubbles is because the central agency that controls the currency doesn't actually have a good knowledge about how much currency actually exists, right? So when you have like the fractional reserve like banking system, like the central bank lends out loans to the private banks, and then there's interest that gets generated, and that interest though is new money that gets generated, right? And so, but if you have unregulated economic systems, it's very hard to measure how much of new money is being created. And so when there's a case like, for example, the 1929 crash, when all like huge large bank loans couldn't be liquidated, for example, that the liquidation of the actual currency had a direct impact into all the added surplus that was added from all the interest that was being generated, right? And since the central bank didn't actually know how much there was, it created a huge bubble and a crash, right? But like today, like central banks have a way like better understanding of how much money there is in the economy, and so they can adjust inflation rate and be sure that it reduces the amount of like bubbles that exist. And there is, if you look at the empirical data, the amount of recessions and depressions happen way less frequently, and when they do happen, they're way less severe than they used to be in the past. That's mostly due to regulation.
No, I have to disagree. Well, first of all, as an Austrian, I'm against the counterfeiting of money, right? And that's essentially what the central bank does when they print off more. And this starts with the banks, as you said, giving out loans, but loans that aren't backed by anything that's real. There's nothing backing the loan. They can even
to create a depression. All the central bank has to do is stop giving loans because money is created out of debt. All right. So we owe a quarter on every dollar in circulation. The money to come from to cover the debt, you have to borrow more money.
No, the thing is, it's like the government, or so the central bank basically prints off more money, right? And that starts with the loans given by the local banks. They basically order money.
We trade
wait,
bonds.
Do you guys know? Do you guys know why
population.
the government prints out more money? That's really interesting. It's really a key thing to know. Why does the government print money every year?
Oh, I'd like to hear it.
Like, do you guys know? Like, there's a basic reason
Because
for this.
they have to keep up with the debt.
No, that's not why.
Oh, go ahead. I want to hear what you have to say.
I mean, it's just a basic, like, the reason why the government prints out more money every year is because new money gets created not by other things than the central bank, right? When you have interest, like, what is interest? It's money being created off of money. So if you have interest, like, accumulating over the years, what happens is that you have a huge increase in the money supply, right?
Well, that's if you're giving out loans that aren't backed.
No. I'm just talking about basic interest. Like, if you just go to your bank and they give you $100 and they charge you 10% interest, right? When they do that, $10 gets created out of thin air.
But
you understand what I mean?
Yeah, but that shouldn't happen. That money should be backed by money should be in savings, and then that's what you're taking.
So you're saying
against.
loans shouldn't exist?
System,
No.
Modern mechanics right now. We're talking. That is how it works.
No,
Yes,
what I'm saying is how it should work is that there should be savings on one end of the calculation in the ledger, and then you take a loan out, you borrow that savings from somebody else, and then they charge you a fee, which you pay over time through generating profit.
The thing is, like, that type of economic system you want can only be like enforced by some authoritarian regime, right? No one's gonna, like, if in a free market libertarian society, people are gonna charge interest, and they're not gonna like make sure that the interest is like in their savings, right?
You don't
You're
have
gonna create.
It debases and devalues the currency while stealing the actual wealth, the resources from the people of the country.
You don't have to print more money, and the printing of the money is the problem. Like, when you do these loans that aren't backed, you're basically just counterfeiting currency.
No, but the reason why the central bank like prints more money is to account for all the new money that was created by all the interest, generation, right?
Yeah, exactly. But that's what I'm saying, though. They shouldn't be.
No, but there's no way around that, right?
Yeah, there is, because you could take loans out against money that's actually there.
Yeah, but that would create a huge, like, a regressive, like, economic system that would be really terrible for businesses and people.
No.
Right?
What happens is when you print extra money, you create the bubble because you're putting a low price on loans.
Because what you're arguing for is an economic system that has no deficits. Yeah, but that's, again, without even like a small business, right? You can't do a small business without having some kind of deficit spending, right?
Well, let's say
you're like gonna create a huge amount of poverty for no reason.
No, but by printing off money, you're creating poverty.
No, but again, you're not.
No,
Yeah,
poverty
you
are. Oh my God.
and all that shit is built into the system.
No, hold on.
Okay.
Let me explain. Okay, so let's say there's $1 million in the system, right? So if you double that money, so that $1 million is supposed to represent all the things you can buy in that system. Now, if you double that money, everyone that had savings, their money basically went down by half, right? I mean, roughly. So old
Where
ladies.
does the money come from to cover the debt? It's a trap.
Sorry, I missed that.
All right, so say we borrow that $1 million from the Fed. As a country, we borrow that $1 million, and that's all the money we have. Okay, but the Treasury bonds that we signed based on population rates say we'll pay a quarter on every dollar, right? The thing is, it's never ending. You always have to borrow more money to cover that debt. It's a trap.
Well, that's my point's that the state when you print off extra money, it devalues the existing currency. If you don't
It debases the currency.
if you don't expand
Right.
the economy, for example. But I mean, ideally, if the economy, let's say, ideally, you should be able to put $10 in the bank, for example, and have, as the economy grows, that $10 can now just buy a bigger portion of the economy. But what happens instead is you put $10 in the bank, and the economy grows a little bit, but they've printed off so much more, you can now buy half as much with the money you had before.
Can I ask a question here then?
Yeah, good.
How well does that relate to a global market?
Oh, I mean, things get more complex, obviously, when you're talking about different countries.
Well,
if you look
how
at,
much have you delved into that idea then?
I'm not there yet.
Well, that's the thing is like we're talking about some giant, grand, big structures here.
Yep.
And we're talking about what our ideas are about how to make them work better for us as individuals. And if we want to talk about them in these regards, like we need to take those kind of things into consideration. I mean, if we want to change a giant structure, like let's say our economic structure or political structure, we still have to be able to relate to foreign entities in many capacities. And we need to take those kind of things into consideration. That's why when I advocate for my point of view, I'm doing it in the method that Jordan Peterson would, by taking personal responsibility.
Well, the thing is, we can analyze at different levels, obviously, of abstraction. Like you can look at the world system, or you can look at each individual country or city. But I mean, the idea is still the base principles are the same. If you double the supply
Right, so
of currency to
when we
represent the
talked,
economy, it makes the currency worth less.
when you and I talked in the last, podcast that we had,
Yeah.
we were talking about it in the form of I'm trying to advocate for we have to move through the system that we have now to get to any one of these options, like any one of them. Like let's say I have a different version of what I'm looking for than you do. Post-Scarcity has a different version of it than either of us. And that's what we're talking about, is that we have 350 million Americans with an infinite variety of views on how to make that work. And what I'm trying to advocate for is that if we can start making the baby steps together, that's how we can rock the system.
Yeah, I do have the Austrian school behind me in terms of my beliefs, but I am also realistic. I don't know if I can, if we could convince enough people to get out of the coercive models, but
Well, that's what I'm saying is like that's why I'm saying it the way I am, because when we talk about it in these giant grandiose terms, you can't. That's just not, unless you're talking about armed revolution, you aren't going to suddenly take control of the market and force it into this new box that we've decided that is going to be the most utopian version of what we can create with our limited knowledge and capabilities.
I don't even want utopia. I just want old ladies on pensions to be able to not have to eat dog
but that's
food.
what I'm saying is like you have your version of what that best version of our systems could be. Post-Scarcity has his own version of what that best version of our current systems could be. And my point is that we have to be able to come together in a way where when we make our next move, our next step, your next, dollar you spend, the next taxes that you earn, like those are the things that add up to these giant systems that you're talking about. And the only way to influence them is through the small, direct methods that are available to us right now.
Well, one thing I do want to ask, Saxon or Post-Scarcity. What's like, for example, old ladies on pensions? They obviously are they get screwed every time the economy, but every time the central bank prints off money and their pension doesn't go up to match the rate. What do we do about that?
I mean, do you have any evidence that when the central bank increases the supply every year that their pension gets decreased, and
No,
that's
it's not.
the
It's not.
causal relationship.
Sorry, their pension might stay the same, but I mean, if the money supply goes up, then you get inflation unless the economy goes up to match it.
Except that's not true, right? Like the inflation has basically been the same for the last like 30 years. It
Well,
hasn't actually increased.
yeah, well, what? No, inflation at 3% a year compounded over 30 years is pretty big.
I mean, but it's not, right? Like we used to have inflation of like 90% in 1 year.
Okay, so,
Right,
so
3%.
just to let you know, inflation's such a problem that the pensions have to keep going up every year just to match it. They've actually put systems in to match that,
Yeah, that's not a problem. That's just a normal part of like fractional reserve banking systems,
which
right?
is which is why it's broken.
But again, what's broken is having inflation being, completely variable every year, and you have deflation and inflation. What's more like, stable for society is to have the same inflation rate every year, so that your pension plans, for example, when you negotiate, when you have your unions do collective bargaining, they can say, okay, for the next 10 years of our contract, we're going to have a 3% increase in the pension, because that's what the projections are for the inflation rate. If we didn't know what the inflation rate was going to be for the next 10 years, then it would heavily affect like pension plans, for example.
Well, I mean, we wouldn't need to do like necessarily wage increases if the economy, like for example, if you had deflation, where the economy grows into the money supply rather than the money supply growing into the economy. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but again, when you have deflation is way worse than inflation, right?
How come?
I mean, because then you almost have no incentives to do any investment. People would just be saving up their money, and the economy would go down.
Why do you think that is?
I mean, because your money is worth more in your bank account than it is if you invest it, and then it tanks in value, right?
Okay, well, I don't see why that's a problem. Like you still have economic growth because people would still make investments.
But again, if people are disincentivized from making investments,
what happens is that,
I mean, again, this is a basic law of economics. When you have I mean, and every example in history, when there's deflation, people don't invest their money. They hoard it and they save it. They don't spend it.
No, it's not the deflation that caused them not to spend their money. It's the change. It's the rapid change. Every time there's a rapid change, people hold back because they're not sure what the rules are going to be. So once the rules stabilize, then they invest. So deflation or inflation aren't really good. It's just like, but deflation at least would, people with their existing savings, their savings would actually be worth something. With inflation, your savings slowly lose value.
Okay, no, but again, the biggest problem isn't inflation or deflation; it's stability. It's right.
Yeah.
So what we have a system currently where the policy objectives of the conservative and the liberal government and every government is to have stability, right? That's the main goal. It's not to have inflation or deflation, right? It just happens to be that the inflation of 3% a year is what's considered stability.
So
right?
There's no profit and stability there.
Yeah.
No, there's lots of profit and stability.
When you understand, though, it's musical chairs, though. This poverty, you're never going to get rid of world hunger in this debt-based money system. It's musical chairs. There's always going to be somebody left out to dry. Yeah. All right? And until we're ready to change that, you know what I mean? And raise the quality of life for everybody instead of the few, then, like, we're just, like, pissing in the wind and doing more of the same.
I agree with you, and I think that we should move. I think we should slowly decommodify our economy and move away from depending on on a monetary economy, right?
I want to move away from monetarism altogether. Let's try something different. I'm not saying it's better, but it's different. That's what a fucking scientific method is.
But again,
keep doing the same thing over and over and getting the same results. How you gonna learn any fucking thing? You got to get new results. Try shit differently.
Well, right. One thing I'm always curious about, it's like, consumption versus production. A lot of people say, okay, well, if you want to have high economic growth, you want to induce consumption.
Yeah, it's this cyclical model of the business cycle.
Yeah, but the thing is, it's like, how do you consume something that hasn't been produced?
You grow up being brainwashed into a consumerism.
No, that's not what the theory.
Like, you're going to be buying. It don't matter what they're selling. You're going to be buying next.
That's not what it is. The cyclical model, like the business cycle, is simply the empirical notion that when people are have a higher propensity to consume, it will create incentives to increase the production. Right?
Does that make any sense to you, though?
I mean, yes, it makes a lot of sense.
How do you buy an iPhone if there's no iPhones, for example?
Well,
Do you
my
just, do you
thing
just,
is
do you just
that
get
whole
money and then
incentive
throw it
thing.
around?
You know,
No, that
when
that's not, again, that's like a really weird way to conceptualize it. Like the way to conceptualize it is like in economies where you have a very large like power of consumption, you're more likely to have people that buy a lot of iPhones, and that will induce a large production of iPhones. But in places where
that's not
people
the way
have
to go, though.
low levels of consumption power, there's less of an incentive to produce things, right? That's just the basic knowledge of it. That's the notion, anyways. Yeah.
Oh, go ahead there.
That consumer mentality, you can't maintain that. That's not sustainable.
Yeah, it is not sustainable. I agree with you. Yeah.
Well, that's what I mean,
And that's
though.
the thing is like we can analyze different models all day
Yeah.
and current constructs all day, but it's the changes that need to be made to move toward this no money. It's a barrier. It's like take it out of the fucking equation altogether.
I mean, so again, in economics, they have a term for this. It's called negative externalities, right? So it's when two people do a trade and there's a hidden cost that's incurred on a third party, right? So the classic example of this is like
Air pollution.
there's a factory that produces arsenic or something, and they reduce all their waste in the water, and the arsenic goes in the river, and then downstream, and there's an indigenous tribe that lives there, and they all die, right? So like yeah, I mean,
any
but
kind of socialistic structure will not be any longevity because of competition and borders. If you remove all the borders, socialism might actually have a chance when you don't have competition.
Yeah.
New Harmony, Indiana, that experiment, the Marxist experiment where they had the town and everybody worked at the factory, and as long as the factory prospered, everybody prospered, and it did for a little bit of time until somebody else came because of the free market, okay, with new technology. Because we were talking about incentive a minute ago. The caveman moving fucking rocks did not need any incentive to make the fucking wheel and a wheelbarrow to move more rocks because he was tired of toting one at a time. Technology is what makes your life better, not money. All right. So
technology or infrastructure, yes.
Yeah.
So any forward futuristic model cannot be based on like wages and slave labor because the need for that kind of labor is being phased out. Like, where are these jobs? How are people going to support themselves when everything's automated?
Yeah, no, I agree with you, right? The question is like, how do we get there, right? I mean, that's the $1,000,000 question.
Yeah, I don't think it'll ever get there.
And I believe firmly that you declare every natural resource on the planet common heritage. It's everybody's. You know what I mean? And you have to look at it that way instead of mine. It's like the American Indians. They didn't own the land. They belonged to the land.
The question though should be, how do we internalize externalities within our economic calculations, right? And so, right, so that, like, a basic example for this is like how we have almost zero conceptions of recycling efficiency within our consumer products, right? So for a consumer good to be sustainable or ecological, it would have to have, from the initial design phase, a design where all of the product can be recyclable, or it can be modular, it can be reused, it can be easily to fix, right? All these design principles are not part of the motivating incentives that are part of the market structure, right? So when a corporation builds an iPhone, they're not concerned about building a product that has 100% sustainability production value, right? What it's concerned about is increasing short-term profits for a shareholder to lose. And because of that, it actually has perverse incentives where they're actually going to do the opposite. They're going to design iPhones that have a very short duration time that break purposely fast. The case with iPhone was that they had like the iPhone 6, and they did a software update where like it like purposely like fucked over your battery, so you have to like get a new one. Like there's all these examples, right? And like this is what I mean is like if we were truly talking about having a sustainable economic system, we will have to like reduce as much as we can any market incentives from the economic system.
Oh, that's brutal, man. So like if you like, for example, if you do that, right? Like I agree, it would be great to be able to capture all these costs or whatever, externalities. But the problem is that raises the prices for consumers, and then they can't get the things that help to better their lives. Like you basically, I mean, and that's great for us first worlders. We can be all moral and say, look, I bought this phone, it's totally sustainable. But like if you're in Africa or something,
I don't think that's true.
But if you're in Africa or a country that's just not as economically developed, these costs become prohibitive.
And you don't see that technology for 10 years either.
Yeah. So
Like the
third
thing
world
is, I
countries-
don't agree with you. I think we have the technology right now. We have the theoretical capacity to have a completely like sustainable like product production capacity. We simply don't do it because we have market. The market basically controls most of the production sector, right? It's
Hey,
a
hold
matter
on.
of political will. It's not a matter of like we don't have the technology to do it.
I'm hearing something kind of crazy here. I'm hearing everyone in agreement.
well, no,
Which
I'm
I
in
didn't
favor
know.
of the
I didn't think
market.
this was going to go this way at first.
but what that means though to me is that we need to take this idea and we need to really work into it. We finally got one part of it that actually like we can all see eye to eye on.
Well,
I think the first step is
Yeah.
advocating for scientists and social engineers to start taking places in Congress and in our government instead of popularity contests.
well, I looking into it myself, I think the only really real way to do it is through the market. There's no other efficient way. The state is just too inefficient, and when you centralize things too much, they also lose efficiency. So I don't see how you could do it without the
There's
market.
many examples of being more efficient. Again, like I think there's more examples of the private sector being more inefficient than government industries,
Well, they can afford it,
right?
too.
Like a classic example. I know. I think you're from Canada, right? But like a classic example is the healthcare system, right? Like in the United States, since it's a market-dominated system, what happens is that it creates a huge bureaucracy that's completely inefficient, right? It creates a huge bureaucracy of insurance providers, of people who check claims
Oh,
in a system where you could have that same system with better outcomes without any of the bureaucratic bloat, right? That's what happens in Canada, and that's what happens in most other European countries.
well, yeah, that's true.
You can have
Well, it's true, but
you leave things up to the market. It can create huge inefficiencies.
but
It's not like a right. I'm
Yeah,
not saying
yeah,
all
I-
government
I
institutions are perfectly efficient, but right.
Well, I
Yeah.
understand, but
I'm just saying you have to be careful. Yeah.
Well, the thing in the States is like we kind of piggyback off a lot of their stuff because we don't make those investments that they do with their sort of their profit system. Their R&D is much more significant than ours. So they kind of
But
give gifts to the world through it. We don't do that.
every major innovation in the United States actually came from the public sector. It didn't come from private industry.
It doesn't matter if it comes from the public sector because the public sector only gets funding through the private sector.
Yeah, no, but I'm talking about like if you're interested in understanding what leads to innovation and what kind of environment leads to innovation, the environment that leads to innovation are usually environments where there isn't a drive for like short-term profit and where people are allowed to have the breathing room to actually like sit down and think about long-term projects, right? And that doesn't happen in the private sector.
But at what cost?
I
though?
absolutely agree with this. I agree that innovation happens in a setting where we have the wild opportunity to make all this money. Like people are more inventive, and there's competition. That's the thing in technology, and that allows innovations to happen faster because people are competing. In a system where they didn't have to compete, would you even have that innovation?
Yeah, and liquid said at what cost? And the cost is high, and the public pays for it. Like a good example of this is the touchscreen, right? So the touchscreen technology was actually invented by a postdoctorate fellow at MIT who was funded by a federal research grant. But before him, there was 50 other graduate students that were also funded by public research funding, and they didn't come up with the technology, right? Like the thing is, like a lot of the technology gets developed in the public sector, like the internet and satellites and all these things. But like if you actually look at the total cost, like the majority of the cost actually ends up being wasted, right? Because it's all the failures that happen, but we only look at the successes,
Well,
right? But the story, though, the moral of the story is that innovation is something that is inherently costly, and to try to think of innovation as something that can be quick and fast is just misunderstanding how innovation works in the first place.
Well, when you're looking at market decisions, right, you're looking at let's say it took 50 times. Maybe let's say that's normal. But in a market, they're going to say, okay, well, I have X amount of money and I can invest it in doing this 50 times and maybe one of them will work out. Or I could invest it in something else that's going to be even, maybe be more useful for people. And maybe we can leave that other stuff for when we have other technologies that also catch up and make that development faster. You could have actually retarded the development by doing that in a sense, because you could.
But you have to be careful that you're just like when the incentives that characterize a private business isn't about creating innovative products that will help civilization, right? They're about creating innovative products that'll help the short-term business interests of the corporation.
Well, I don't
Right?
think
There's
that's
two
true.
different.
Like,
So
let's imagine like some other not the government, but let's say some private company invented the internet, right?
wait, there's a good example of
How
this.
rich would they be though?
No, like right now, there's four or five organizations worldwide that are funding research on the quantum computer. Right? Can you guess how many of them are private industries?
Oh, I don't know.
None of them. They're all governments, right? Same thing with fusion energy, right? This is the same thing with the internet, right? When the internet was being built, it was just a dozen of like scientists and the the DDO and the Pentagon, right? Like no private corporation were even somewhat interested at all, right?
But what's that
And this
tell
is
you?
I mean, it tells me that the incentives that characterize very innovative things that are like, civilization changing don't occur in an environment where short-term profits are the key motivating factor.
Well,
That's what it tells me.
that's one way of looking at it. But another way of looking at it is that the system's so coercive that private industry doesn't really stand a chance competing against the state.
But the thing is, if we didn't have a state sector and we only had competitive industry, we would have a society and a civilization that had very few innovations.
No, I don't think so. You would have slow march towards a wide variety of innovations rather than having like sort of pinpoints
but
and
like
filling in the gaps.
Hold on, guys. Let me jump in here real quick. All right, I just want to ask a couple questions here. Okay, let's say in the idea of this, like, liquid. How would you frame what you're talking about here?
Okay, so what I'm saying is that markets sort of move more flat towards innovation. So they do like a sort of a broad swath of innovation slowly.
Okay, I got you. Let me ask this: is there still going to be advertising?
Oh, I don't know. I guess so. Edward Bernays
All
kind
right.
of made it.
So now here's the deal: they're advertising because they're competing against each other, right? Well, that means that you have industries that are creating waste when their company fails, which also ends up people end up losing jobs. This idea of the market taking care of everything doesn't really account for the fact that the market's relying on the competitiveness of the of the industries, and that means that people are going to fall off the end. They have to, because they're competing.
Not necessarily, because it depends on your market share, right?
No. Jobs crash. They go under.
Yeah.
Jobs are lost. That's going to happen.
Capitalism work, and then 10 more better ones supposed to pop up in its place. Okay, that is the capitalist way.
Well, not necessarily.
Yeah.
You might have negative 10 jobs jump up in its place.
Well, I mean, we don't know though if we don't try something different.
Well,
that's why the first one failed.
Well, what I'm saying is it's just creative destruction. Like, it sucks. Like if you're a typewriter repairman, but I mean, no one uses typewriters anymore.
Right. So, but what I'm saying is that, like, the idea of this is that we need to be able to have that safety net for people when that happens, right? Like, you don't want that person to lose their job, to just crash and go under and not have a chance to get back up, right? That you want them back in the workforce, right?
Yeah.
All right. So, in my opinion, what I'm talking about here is that this idea of the markets taking everything does not take that into consideration.
Well, these people are part of the market, correct?
Until they aren't, yes.
Well, no, they're part of the market regardless. They just might not participate a lot, but in certain circumstances. But there's going to be a market for people that have lost their jobs and are looking for like new training or whatever, for example.
Well,
I think what Cripple was saying was like
job creation is not keeping up with innovation. You understand what I'm saying?
Okay,
the more you innovate and automate, you get less people, and it's not going to keep up.
Well, I agree, but there's actually a more fundamental problem that's causing that.
Well, I'm all about treating cancer, not symptoms.
So like, yeah, exactly. So what happens is when you have a state that's very coercive and prevents investment, which is what happens when like the state centralizes power through high taxation rates, is that you get less or ability to make for these people to make investments. So you have less competition, and all these and the regulations too that regulate these large companies, say like Ford. At first, it was like, oh yeah, we got to do this for safety, but then Ford figured out, oh hey, if we just put a lot more regulations in, it's going to stifle competition. I think back in the 60s or 70s, there was something like 200 car companies in the States. Now how many are there? 3? And that's gone lockstep with the regulation increase on cars. Now, I'm not saying all innovations on cars are bad, but it's that the regulation's technically the coercive factor which prevents innovation.
Yeah, but the thing is, you have to ask yourself, like at the time where Ford was manufacturing cars, like the regulations that needed to be in place there were less like needed compared to today, right? A car today is like a heavily like a complicated technological product, right? It's not just like an engine and a couple springs and wheels, right? Like you need like very sophisticated regulations to make sure that those highly complicated technological, like basically box of metal things on wheels with like satellite capacity are like regulated and they won't kill you and they're not dangerous, right?
But you
like
could, but yeah, and you could buy those. But why can't you buy like a car that's very basic and like a Model T or whatever, for example?
I mean, the reason is because they're usually not safe.
Or because
we wouldn't have a DUI law if the cars drove themselves. All right, but when you start building these cars not to break down, like good shit is invented all the time. If it doesn't make money or if it goes against the current structure, and like a tire that doesn't go flat, they're going to bury it. You know what I mean? Because cars that don't need to be worked on shuts down a whole industry.
But no, it's not true though, because there's like the world's so underdeveloped. Like there's lots of space, room to grow. The reason why you get these things buried is because there's no competition. A competitive marketplace would allow for cost competitive innovations that would like, why would you buy a car from Ford that is going to break down because it has built-in what's that called? There's a term for it.
Planned obsolescence stuff.
Planned obsolescence. It has planned obsolescence. Why would you buy Ford when you could buy Thord, and Thord doesn't have planned obsolescence?
I mean, but there is I think there's a fairly competitive scene for high tech cars, right? It's not like a monopoly.
It virtually is. There's only 3 big companies in the States.
There's only 3 companies in the set.
And there's
Here,
Tesla.
let me throw this out because I've been thinking about this for some time now, and I want to wrap it around an example. So let's take a TV, all right? We look at it in this form of, all right, I want to build the best TV possible that's going to last me the longest at the highest quality. All right, so we're getting rid of the planned obsolescent manufacturing stuff, right? Okay, so now this TV is going to last you 3 years. But the thing is that when we make this TV, the reality is we don't know how long it's going to last. And now that you've got this best TV, like you're not, where's the innovating coming? Because you're not spending money on more TVs. You have your TV. It's going to last you 3 years. Besides the ones that break down, maybe you have to go buy a new replacement. But the market isn't going to allow for you to make a lot of money over time if you're paying for the best TV possible. And so it loses out on that innovation. So I do understand that part of how markets can help push innovation.
How are we going to get you to buy a new TV next year if this one's going to last 3 years?
That's exactly what I'm saying, though.
That's consumerism.
But what I'm saying is like, all right, but now who's funding the innovation for the new TV? Where's that funding coming from now?
Somebody else who's developing better technology. That's where the competition comes from.
Right, but but again, where's that funding coming?
It's from profit.
From profit.
Right, but what I'm saying is that if you're building the best TVs possible, and you're lowering the amount of income you're going to be getting over time, then
you're not always going to be the best TV maker. That's the thing is technology and innovation. You can only be the best TV for a small length of time.
Well, but we're putting this in the context of like hey, we want to use our resources in the best way possible. Like that's the framework behind making a TV in the best quality possible. You want to utilize your resources in the best. Well, that means that you're trying to cut down on the amount of resources going into this whole endeavor to begin with. Well, that means that you're only building so many TVs per year. You're only replacing TVs every so often, and now there's no profit to be made because the TVs are already there.
Oh, there'll still be profit because I mean TVs break down, new people are born, people move, they break their TVs. Like there's lots of reasons. Like I've never heard.
Hey man, I'm helping your market argument out really
No.
like a lot here.
It doesn't matter.
So I don't know what you're telling me.
I'm just saying, like, there's the thing is, if there's more competition in the market, someone that has a TV that lasts like say 50 years versus 10, and you know that, and they guarantee it, like, and it's only like a little bit more expensive than the cheaper one. Like, you might go for the more expensive one, and if not, maybe you don't have the money, you get the cheap one. But
Possibly, but what I'm saying is that the funding, like that doesn't leave a lot of room for when you're already going to be paying for the overhead on any production you make on those TVs. It doesn't leave a lot of room for R&D.
well, they do calculate how much, like they calculate their profit margins to include some R&D. Because if they don't, then they're going to fall behind the competition.
I get that, but the argument that's being made here is that we're taking planned obsolescence out of the equation. We're trying to make the best quality possible on each.
The best
And I'm agreeing with you. I believe that stifles innovation.
Well, if you're already making the best quality TV, then
Again,
maybe not much more innovation is needed.
You redesign the education system. You can promote.
I think we have to be careful, like, because we're talking about very like theoretical things, right? Like when you guys are talking about like competition, like a more competitive market leads to more innovation. That's a theoretical assumption that's like made in economics, but it's not something that happens in real life, right?
How
Like
come?
if you look at, for example, Samsung, what they spend their R&D money on isn't like scientists and that they hire themselves. They spend them on headhunters that basically become vultures around university departments that like monitor the research there, right? Yeah, like what happens in real life isn't what this economic theory that the profit that a successful company is basically one that uses the profit in a way that maximizes their R&D and hires more scientists. Like that's just not the case if you actually look at the empirical evidence, right?
Oh, for
That's
sure.
not what happens.
It's messy out there. I'm not going to deny that. I mean, but if, for example, the government wasn't stealing or basically coercing tax money from people and then using that to fund pet projects for Samsung to steal, I mean, then it would be on Samsung's table and in the market. And
the thing is, I'm not interested in like the theoretical models. I'm interested in what actually happens in the real world, right? Like for me, there's no like you can't find me a good evidence or a good anecdote of an instance where there was an increase in competition, and that increase in competition led to more innovative technological products. I don't see that ever occurring. Right.
So wait, there's no case where someone increased competition and you got better products.
Yeah.
Or well, I mean.
No, not better products. Like because it depends what you mean by better products, right? Like there is cases where in a market you have more competition, and the result is that the price of the product goes down, right? So that happens, but it's something else to say that when you have competition, it increases the innovation. So what I mean, like by actually like innovating new products, right? I don't see that happening.
Well, let's look at personal computers, for example. Like at the beginning, you had like all these sort of lower quality Commodore 64s and such. And then Apple, and then you got Microsoft, and they kind of basically Microsoft anyway subcontracted all that out, and now you have like all these different competing computer companies.
That wasn't like when it started with Apple and Microsoft. That wasn't a competitive market, right? Like they was basically a monopoly. Like they collaborated extensively with each other. They even had a lawsuit at one point, and the lawsuit was around. I remember the ending was that it was something to do with. Apple stealing Microsoft's like operating software, and that instead of going to trial, they just like had a backdoor agreement that they said that in exchange for Microsoft using Apple's iOS, they would allow Apple to use Microsoft Excel's program without any like payment. Right, so there's a bunch of these cases where like they had like skirmishes with each other, but they always like became amicable because they realized that they were the only two major competing things on the market, right? And like it's a relationship that is really characterized by oligopolistic tendencies and not by a competitive market.
Well, it is
right?
it is still sort of competitive because like if Apple and Microsoft, they're self-regulating, because if they raise their prices too high, that would enable new entrants into the market who could then, it would be worthwhile for them.
But that's just not true though, right? Like,
well, you haven't seen, it hasn't happened, so you don't know.
No, but I'm saying Apple and Microsoft instituted millions of policies that basically prevented anyone from coming onto the market, right?
Okay, how
like
so?
For example, like Microsoft, it was famous for forcing all the hardware companies. That one of the big ones at the time was IBM. There's a bunch of other ones, but they forced them to preemptively like download their iOS on their hardware, so that when you went to a store, you could buy a computer with different hardware, but they all came with the Microsoft iOS, right? So that was a specific policy, anti-competitive policy that they implemented in the market to prevent anyone from competing with them, right? Yeah. And it was very successful, right? And this happens all the time. Apple did the same thing, and they did the same thing, for the next 20 years on different, types of markets, right? But like they engage in heavy anti-competitive behavior because they had a monopolistic grasp on the market.
But at the same time, they don't, because if they really were being anti-competitive, they would jack their prices up way higher.
What? No, but again, it's just a very
Start thinking about it.
It's a naive view that you have of
no, it's not naive, right? Because look, if Microsoft, okay, well, let's say a computer costs $1,000 right now. Let's just be rough. So they sell a computer for $1,000. If they raise that price to $10,000, maybe that $9,000 difference in gouging would enable like a competitor to put out, some guy in his garage to pump out computers, because if you sold them for $5,000, you'd still be making a buttload of money.
Like, if someone wanted to like compete with Microsoft in the late 90s, and they wanted, like, so they had a new iOS system, right? They couldn't compete because they couldn't get their product on the hardware, on the actual computers. So regardless of the price of the computer, it didn't matter because Microsoft had an advantage, and no one would be able to compete with them.
Well, but that's assuming that, like, there's no other new companies. Sorry.
No, but there was a bunch of new companies. They all failed because the market was dominated by Microsoft.
Oh, but it's also because they had low enough prices to do it, right? Like, if they raised their prices too high, it wouldn't have worked.
No, it had nothing. But again, you're like, you're viewing the whole history through a very like abstract theoretical model that is very like common within Austrian economics, right? You're discounting.
It's not abstract.
You're discounting what actually happens, right?
But
you're
saying very basic.
No, but you're saying, if something else happened that didn't happen, then it would be different, obviously. Yeah. But again, why is that interesting, right? Well, why aren't you interested with what actually happens in economics rather than things that happen in your head?
Because you can't calculate for every single aspect, but you can look at particular things and say how each one would have an effect. You can't discount the fact that if there was competitors offering a lower quality or a lower price product, and they could still make profit, that would happen. But the thing was, Microsoft did all those coercive acts and anti-competitive behavior, and then also kept their prices low. They made less profit in a sense. They could have made more, and if they had, that would have caused other entrants into the market, which would have created more competition for them. But they didn't want that competition, so they kept their prices, say, reasonable, for example.
One thing you can bank on in the market is fucking change.
Can I just give you an example? Like, for me, like what you're saying is kind of like a chemist said, like, oh, it doesn't matter the relation between sodium and water, because if you actually mix a saline solution in the water and you have a potassium emitter, then you'll have a different reaction, right? But like that's just like not how science works, right? You don't do science by looking at the real world and then saying, oh, the real world could have been different if a different variable was at play. Obviously, it would have been, right? But we're not interested in that. We're interested in what happens.
But
like, you know what I mean?
I'm not doing that, though. I'm just telling you you're looking at a scenario. You're saying what happened, and I'm saying, yeah, that happened because of this, and they would have had different effects if they had done something different. And then you're claiming on what happened that's all that could have ever happened.
Yeah, but I don't disagree with you. I'm not disagreeing with you. Like, if Microsoft willingly, engaged in less competitive actions and lowered their price, I'm sure there would have been a more competitive market. But how is that relevant to the discussion, right? It's like making up a random story just for the hell of it.
I want to ask a quick question here, because my look on all of this is like we we talk about these things and we keep talking about them in these really big abstract ways. Like, they're big markets. Like, well, they're regulated, and we want, either we want to remove or add regulation to all of this. But the reality is, like, for example, post-scarcity, let's say the research is in, the math has been done, the ways that you're looking at the world
Too big to fail.
are correct. What are the steps that you as an individual can take, right now, like tomorrow, the next day? Like, what steps can you as an individual make to start making that happen?
It's a big question.
I mean, you're just asking me, like, you're asking me
He's
what
saying,
can
look
I
at
do
your
to
current
affect the political
situation.
landscape?
He's saying, look at your current situation and understand the things that you can change and things that you can't.
No,
And once you understand that, what are the changes you can make in your day-to-day life to push towards this something different?
I mean, again, the answer is the same that it's always been, right? Like, if you want to, affect the political landscape, the thing you do is you organize yourself in groups and you advocate, political structures. You constantly put pressure on them to change. That's how it's always been done, right? Power is never given willingly. It's always something that's fought for, right?
Well, here's my deal. Like, we've seen a lot of examples on how to make this happen without throughout the millennia. Different kingdoms and empires and nations and economies have grown and collapsed over the years. And now here we are in this situation where, to me, it sounds like 4 people here want to see something different in their environment. I mean, I think we can all agree on that, right?
Oh, maybe. It depends what the other changes could be.
No, I'm just saying, like, no, I want to. I'm asking a simple yes or no question. Do you want to see a change in the environment that you interact with?
Well, if the change would result in
about.
something worse, no. If the change would result in something better, of course. That's the problem. Is like maybe what we have.
To answer your question, I think most of us are utilitarian in a sense, right? We all want to maximize good for the overall population. We just disagree about how to get there. Right?
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
I
So
agree with that,
my question to you, post-scarcity, Sax, is what if you're trying to advocate for the some form of socialist viewpoint, standpoint, and let's say the like I said, the results are in, the research has been done, the math has been done, it looks right, these are the directions, the directions you're moving in is the direction that we want to go. What is it that, so you vote, you organize politically, but one of the things that I'm trying to really push here is that we keep limiting ourselves in the sense that, like, we have this democracy that is available to us right now, and for some reason we don't look at it like that. Like, the truth is that that money may be an illusion, but we're the ones that give it power. And if we want to make any changes, we need to understand our relationship to that more. It's not just about voting and about getting people together on that political stance. Like, I'm not saying that that's not something you should do, but for some reason, and this is what my main point is, I can't understand why we can't get people to relate to the fact that you are the one supporting the system up right now in its current form.
All right, so this boils down to my theory about, for a new system to take place, the current system has to fail. Now, how can we make this current system take your money out of Bank of America, put it in a smaller bank that's unaffiliated with the central banks? You take their power away when you start fucking with their money.
If you're not,
this idea about everybody not buying gas in one day.
Well, no. What my point is that when you work a job right now, you're giving money to the government in the form of tax. They use that money in, up teen million ways that either benefit us or hurt us or benefit other foreign, entities or hurt them. And there's a good chunk of that I know what it does. Yeah, there's a good chunk of it that I don't like, There's a good chunk of it that I don't even know what it's being used for. And I want to be more involved in what my taxes are going to. So I'm saying in my day-to-day life, if I can live more self-sustainably so that my taxes are limited, they're shorter. I'm limiting the amount of time and effort and money that I'm giving towards our government. Well, that's my voice. I am speaking to them. Do you see what I'm saying? That is the democracy that we have available to us. And for some reason, we don't understand that.
I mean, I don't agree with you. I think a bunch of people understand it, right? Like the United States has a very rich history of like civil disobedience and social movements, right? People in power are very much aware of what happens when the public knows of their power, right? Like for example, like a good example of this is if you look at Jimmy Carter's administration, he published something called the Trilateral Commission, and in it he described what was called the problem of the excess of democracy. And what he was referring to was that the short-term lived experiment of the civil rights movement, right? So he was describing the problems that happened when social movements and the average working person had too much power, right? So he was literally explicitly describing what happens when people are aware that they're the ones who hold all the power, right? So the United States is really one of the countries that has the most like engagement and experience with this, right? Like if you look at countries like China doesn't have this history, right? It has, there is some attempts at social movements in China, but they get completely squashed and they get genocided right away, right? In the United States, we have basic like civil freedoms that prevent the government from being unjustifiably authoritarian, right? So we have the limited freedoms. Yeah, but again, it's a freedom that we have that I agree with you. More people should be aware of, but I think you should also be aware of the history that a lot of people are aware of it and they've been using that power for a long time.
But that's what I'm trying to say is we don't relate enough to that history, the context behind it, and the way that it's going to affect our future,
the way it's taught. Okay, because kids today are told what to think, not how to think.
I agree.
Yeah,
I think we should bring back the trivium.
I mean, but that's mostly a factor of the educational system, right? I don't know if you guys are aware of the history behind the education system in the United States. Like,
well,
are you guys aware?
They don't want a well-informed, educated public.
Yeah, I mean, but like it goes back to the Prussian education, right? Like I forget the year, but when Napoleon invaded Prussia, that was right, and he lost at Waterloo on the way out. But the furthest in he went to Europe was Prussia, which is basically like Western Russia. But what the Prussian emperor realized afterwards was that the reason why he lost to Napoleon was because he had so many deserters and so many peasant farmers that didn't associate a strong sense of nationality to the Prussian Empire. Right? They were way more involved in their local community, and they said, "Fuck off! I don't want to fight your wars." Did was he instituted a large-scale national educational system that the goal was to create passive submissive citizenry that had a built-in understanding of like patriotic and like national like duties and stuff like that, right? And guess what? Like 30 years later, members of Congress formed a committee on education, and there were delegates that were sent to Prussia to study their educational system because they thought it was a great way to foster unity after the Civil War. And so, right, literally the system that is in place in the United States is literally built on critical thinking, trying to diminish like creativity and encourage passive obedience to authority structures, right? That's the history of the American education system. And like the country, there's only one country on the planet right now that has an education system that's based on the Deweyite school of education, and that's Finland. So in Finland, the basic educational model is they avoid all testing, and teachers, instead of being seen as like an authority that has to fill the empty void that are students and fill it up with knowledge, they're seen as like past seminar, right? So like it's always questions based. So like they're people like kids like interact with each other, and the teacher is more seen as like right that helps the student learn as they go. And so in Finland, for example, from K to 12, they have no test at all. And despite this, when the EU actually does standardized testing among all their countries, Finland scores number one. So they have the best like scores on standardized tests, despite not having any standardized tests throughout their whole education system, right?
Oh, I agree.
So like,
Well, I mean,
Yeah,
are they
I mean,
yeah,
taking
yeah.
are they taking the first few years and looking at what a student is good at, and then focusing on that
Go-
instead of generalizing and grading on things that they're not good at? You know, because like that's where education needs to be. It needs to be on an individual level, and we need to see their skills and how they blossom and where their thought
So
process
there's,
goes.
I mean, the students are in Finland. The way it works is that they're encouraged to basically pursue whatever that they want. So right, so it's not
Yeah.
there's not a
Freedom
strict.
seems-
It only actually last time I looked, it only like segregates into like specialties in late high school. So for most of the educational system, it's a general system. It's not a specialized system.
Hey, you sold me on that.
But-
I'm already against the centralized sort of education system we have here in Canada.
I mean, but
Yeah, go ahead.
again, a lot of private schools in the U.S. and Canada are already using this model, right? Like, if you're familiar with like Montessori schools, that's
Oh, yeah.
what they do, right? Every like they're using the dual model, right? So it's based on being a child as an inherently creative and motivating person, and that the goal of the teacher is to encourage the creativity, not to smack it down with the authority, right? That's kind of the underlying philosophy, anyways. You know,
Boomers, you know.
it's to foster an inherent sense of creativity. Yeah. Anyways, but like those, right? Like when I talk about like socialism, that's also what I talk about, right? I talk about like a complete change in how we think about the values we associate with education itself, right? I think, and that's it's a way of decentralizing power, right? Because
Well, no.
like the tradition, yeah.
How do you decentralize
decentralizing power.
But socialism is by definition centralizing power.
Again, I disagree. I think socialism is by definition a decentralizing ideology.
Oh, but no, but but here's my argument. So when you put so much power in the state, right? Essentially, what's
But
happening
again,
with socialism.
I think again that's not true, right? It's a caricature that was derived through the Cold War era.
No,
right?
well, it's still like the power, all the authority and the decisions are made through the state apparatus.
So wait, before you go any further, like if you actually go back to the roots of socialism, so if you actually read Marx, for example,
I was a socialist for like 15 years, so but go ahead.
yeah, but like if you read Marx's most famous work, which is the Das Kapital, every time he talked about what socialism means in terms of workers and in terms of class struggle and in terms of capitalism, not once did he talk about the state or the government, right? What Marx described when he talked about socialism was the relationship that workers have with the capitalist institutions. It never had to do with delegating every worker, like all the worker authority towards the state apparatus, right? That's a modern invention that is associated with like the USSR and Mao Zedong, right? It's not, so you can, if you want to associate socialism with that, if you want to associate, it's kind of funny though, because like during the October Revolution, for example, in Lenin in 1917, there is a huge power struggle between a bunch of different types of socialists, right?
Yep.
And Lenin, the Bolsheviks who took over power, were a specific type of socialists who were very, very authoritarian, right? The Bolsheviks believed that there shouldn't be any aspects of democracy, that the ultimate power should be in the central committee, that it should not be an elected position, all these things, right? And funnily enough, they kept the term the Socialist Republic of the Soviet States because it appealed to the more left-wing and libertarian socialists, right? And people liked the term socialist at the time because they associated with a decentralized meaning, a libertarian meaning, and a democratic meaning. But funnily enough, at the same time, the Americans also liked using the word socialism, but for the opposite reason, because they thought it was a good propagandistic tool to associate socialism with authoritarianism, right? So you had this Cold War period where literally both parties were using the word socialism, but for different reasons. But in both of the cases, the reasons had to do with diminishing where the roots of socialism come from, right? Well, and the roots are always been a libertarian, decentralizing, and democratic sense.
Well, regardless of like what what the theory was with Marx, like the proof was in the pudding. The ones who took power did what they did. All the ones that didn't take power died.
Yeah, and it's true. It's true that. But the thing is,
when you implement socialism, you get this result.
No. Again,
So,
when you
look,
implement
quick question.
authoritarianism, that's what you
Never
get,
work
right?
With borders.
Hold on, quick question, Sax. All right, let me ask you.
Yeah.
Let's say tomorrow we are inaugurating our first socialist president, right? With all the right views for socialism. Okay.
I mean,
Alright, so
just look
the
at
day
Portugal. They
after-
already have a socialist government.
Well, but hold on. The day after,
Yeah.
your phone breaks. So how does your phone relate to this new socialist economy that is our new reality?
So one of the characteristic things about socialism is the idea of transitional states. So if we're talking about tomorrow, the government elects a socialist party, like it's going to be the same as yesterday, right? There's still going to be Apple and all these other things. The point of socialism is to have a very careful, planned out a way of decommodifying the economy, right? So of removing market incentives and market dominated capitalist infrastructures from the economy slowly over time, right? You can't switch from a capitalist society to a communist society in a day, right? You'll have total chaos. It has to be a very
so this
yeah,
is what I'm
thought out
talking about.
plan.
Then. So
Yeah.
I am asking specifically about this. So let's say, for example, would we like, what are banks' new role in this? Like, are they relating to Wall Street? Do we lose out on all of these Wall Street jobs? Like where what exactly is the new structure going to allow for?
I mean, so like
And where's it going to fall off?
Yeah, like one of the first things and this was already proposed by Bernie Sanders and Jeremy Corbyn, right? Like one of the first things you could do, for example, to encourage a socialist in the economy is you create a policy that says that if a company wants to wants to offshore the corporation, for example, to another country. So let's say, like, for example, in Ontario, where I live, there's a big Toyota manufacturing plant. Okay, so let's say that the people that run the factory want to move this factory to Mexico. So the policy that Bernie Sanders and Jeremy Corbyn wanted to enact said that if a corporation wants to do that, it first has to offer the corporation for sale to the workers themselves as a cooperative business. And if the workers decide against buying it, then and only then can they move to Mexico. And then within this policy, they would also create a specific subsection of a publicly funded bank that would provide loans to new cooperative businesses to encourage worker ownership.
Liquid,
right?
does
So
this
there's
seem
all these things you
Liquid.
can do.
Liquid? Does this seem like a reasonable proposal?
No.
Why so?
There's only 3 motivations for productivity, right? There's the free market, which is based on personal interest. There's the voluntary market, which is based on volunteerism. And there's the coercive market, which is basically like, do it or you're going to be punished in some way. And the only one that's the most productive is the free market. The one that's the least productive is the coercive one. And then there's voluntary, which is sort of in between.
Again, for me, go ahead.
If this company is going to move from one country to another, and it's going to drop all of the jobs in that building.
Okay, well, here's the base problem. The base problem is, what do you set the price to? So the company's like, oh, we'll move it, but we won't move it, but it's going to cost you $40 billion, and the workers obviously don't have that. Then that just totally screws up the.
No, they do, right? Because you have the loaning system, right?
Oh, okay. Well, they make it $3 trillion then. Why would they? What's the incentive to the company not to make the company super expensive?
No, so the way it works is that the valuation of the manufacturing plant would be valued by the government. It wouldn't be valued by the corporation itself.
Well, that's not. Well, that's
the price, right?
Well, that's coercive. So then again.
No, but I mean, you can have what most countries do is they have an independent institution that like for taxes, right? That's what the IRS does, right? When the IRS needs to value like a billionaire's wealth, they have an independent agency that values it to make sure that they're not like fucking over for the taxes, right? You can do the same thing. I mean, yes, it is. That's how they do it.
They have a third party tell you you're fucked.
Yeah.
Yeah, so instead of a third party tells you you're screwed, or it tells you this is how much it's worth, and you're like, well, no, I value my company differently, and then they say, what do you say? Yeah, I value the company differently. I don't want to sell it for that price.
Yeah, and then the third party is going to ask you, do you have any documentation that proves that this is how much your company is worth?
My feelings.
Yeah, but that's not how it works, right? When you
Yeah,
do
but that's how
valuation of
no,
it,
but that's how it works when you sell and buy things on a free market. If you don't do that, then you're in a
talking
coercive
about
market.
large. Yeah,
Wait,
but
hold
when
on,
we're talking about
Jose,
large scale
hold on,
productive
hold on.
factories,
That's what happens when you buy and sell things
the
on the
value
free
of a
market.
No, economical warfare.
that's not true though. Yeah.
No, it's true. When you
Economic
wait, okay,
warfare.
hold on. When you go sell,
Wait, you can't sell things for whatever price you want, right?
Yeah, you can.
That's not how it works.
You can put them for sale
I'm
for
sorry,
whatever price
guys,
you want.
Liquid. I gotta stop and break this down real quick. Can you say that sentence one more time?
The market works by you set a price and then people choose to pay it or not.
All right, so you're saying that if we try to put some kind of safety net so that people have an opportunity to not just fall off and lose their job, right? So you're saying that if we tried to apply something like that in a free market, that the free market would just try to find a loophole to
It would eat it alive.
to overcome
If you
that.
yeah, if you put incentives out there that for people to take advantage, that's what they're gonna do.
Now,
Yeah, but Liquid,
why would that not happen in a regular free market then?
Well, because there's other factors. Like maybe no one wants, like if you wanted to sell the
Well,
company.
you're not understanding
There's
that
other factors here too. Like
if it wasn't-
that's a self-defeating argument.
No, because you could say if you move the company to China, maybe you make a lot more money, so you don't want to sell it to the workers because you make more money over there over a 50-year period.
do that, then you create. No, yeah, but you're only concerned with the welfare of the capitalists, right? Because what we're talking about here is how do we create a better society for the most of people, right?
Yeah,
if you just offshore everything to China and leave.
I agree. I don't like the idea of offshoring.
If you leave everyone out to dry, and
well, that means they're out to dry. That's just the way. It's the free market, man. You want to? You're never going to have innovation.
Okay, so again, you're taking it. Again, you're taking a principled outlook instead of looking at the utilitarian calculation.
Who cares?
Right?
I mean,
you're saying I don't care. You don't care about the welfare of everyone. All you care about is the principles of the free market derived a priori from someone who.
No.
Right?
You don't know. No, I don't. It's a mischaracterization to say I don't care about everyone. What I'm saying is, if you start changing rules and coercing people, it causes other problems in the system as well. If you change the rule just for this thing, then everything else knocks on from that.
I'll take that. I will accept that. I will accept that. You're saying that in either way, people are going to fall off the end, right?
Well, yeah, if you do it that way, like, what's going to stop other companies from being like,
again,
wow, I'm not investing in that place. Look what they do when you leave.
It's also coercion, though. My problem with how you characterize it is that you only associate coercion with state, government regulation, right? What you're not looking at is that the coercion that happens from private corporations that leave their workers out to dry because they have a control over the labor market, right?
That's not coercion.
They have a coercive, leverage over the labor market. Yes, they're offshoring the fact. Yeah, the reason why they're offshoring the manufacturing plant is because they have coercive leverage over the labor market, they know that the workers in Canada can't just go to China and compete with the Chinese workers because they're limited through transportation, right?
No, that's not.
And they're not limited through capital.
No, but that's not true.
That's the difference, right? Because you're saying the corporation has a free market of capital, but there's a very coercive labor market, and so there's discrepancies that happen there that prevent workers from having a fair share. And the government, what it does by having these policies that encourages that, but again, when the government has these policies, what it's trying to do is to rectify the free market. It says, oh, look, we recognize there's an inequality and a coercive force in the labor market, so we're going to have policies that give the workers more leverage to discourage the corporations from leaving and letting their population out to dry.
If a corporation wants to leave, that's the way the market's pulling it, right? Why would you want to stop that?
Because profit is the only thing that matters.
The market produces externalities.
No,
right?
okay, so profit. Define? Let's just for someone says something profit. Let's define profit. What's profit?
The numbers at the end of the day.
Profit is the
surplus. It's the surplus money you have left over from the revenues.
Yeah, basically,
or the cost of operations. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like the incentive for you to act at all. It's actually it's the thing you need to further develop infrastructure. If you don't have profit, you can't.
That's not true.
Okay, tell me how you make infrastructure without profit.
I mean, but again, you don't need profit to act at all, right? People can act without having profit.
Well, yeah, sure, you can act voluntarily, right? But that's what we know. Volunteer and coercive systems are not as productive as free ones.
Yeah, but
How?
there's no such thing
Where do
as
we
a
know
free
that from?
system, right?
Well,
Like,
well, there's been lots.
Wait, can I just-
We could look at studies, but I mean,
This-
like,
this
it's pretty
also goes-
obvious.
yeah, because the thing is, I really don't like using the term free because it's just what like this also goes back to like the discussion I want to have with like collectivization and individualism, right? Because the way I see it is like there's one type of economic system and then there's another type of economic system. They're both collective in a sense because they're all composed of individual actors acting within the constrictions of a given system, right? So if you're talking about market economies, that's a type of economic system.
Mhm.
If you're talking about planned economies, that's a different type of economic system that has its own constrictions, right? But none of them are free and none of them are less free, right?
No, that's not true. That's not true.
No, but again, how is that not true, right? Like
Because a free market is no interaction happens in the free market unless you have at least two parties that both gain from the transaction.
Yeah, but why? Like, but again, it's every time there's a transaction, it's very, very, very rare that a transaction is done on a voluntary free basis. There's always some type of coercion
it's
in
always
play, right?
No, it's always free.
No, it's. I mean, but again, how can you say that someone voluntarily? No, but like, how can you say that someone voluntarily sells their labor at McDonald's, despite the fact that if they don't, they'll live in destitute poverty and they won't be able to feed their family, right? That's a coercive force.
But
no, into the decision of an economic.
That's not the.
Agent.
But that's not involved in that specific transaction. That's a
Yes, it is.
That's a motivation of the guy that's doing the work. But that's not the fault of the person they're doing the transaction with. The person they're doing the transaction with actually relieves them of that. And the thing that's actually coercing them is the fact they need to eat, right? They need to sleep. They need to have food. They need to have shelter. Yeah. Those are things that are that you need as a human being. That's nature that's oppressing you.
No, yeah, exactly. So if we want to have a free system, we have to have a system where people can engage in free voluntary decisions that aren't influenced by the basic coercions of nature,
that's
right?
You can't. But you can't take away those coercions. They're there.
What would you do?
Let me give you a very concrete example, okay? I want you to say if case A and case B are the same, okay? So in case A, you have this was literally me when I was growing up. Okay, I grew up in a middle class family, and I was 15 years old, and I just for the hell of it, one of my friends was working at a fast food, so I was like, oh, that could be fun. So I went to the local Dairy Queen and I put in an application and they hired me. Mm-hmm. And for a year and a half, I worked there and I had a lot of fun. And there's mostly high school kids and we joked around and whatever, right? Okay, so that's case A. And in case B, I'm a single mother with 3 kids. And I have bills to pay and all these, and my kids could literally die if I don't work, right? And so I go, go to the McDonald's and put an application and get hired. So do you think that the coercive forces in both cases here are equivalent?
Yes.
Okay. So
well, I know. I mean, in terms of the employer, yes.
So in case A, my argument is that when I went to Dairy Queen, I did it on a purely voluntary basis because if I didn't go to Dairy Queen, the material conditions of my life would not have changed at all, right?
Well,
what Dairy Queen allowed me to do was like buy a couple of video games, right? If I didn't want to work at Dairy Queen, I would have still been fed. I would had a house over my head. I could go to school and I had all the same benefits. But in case B, if the person chose freely not to work, they would have severe material conditions that you can't just avoid and say that it's not a coercive factor, right? It's literally coercive. If you not choosing to do something leads to death, right? It's like someone holding a gun to your head, right?
It's a factor.
The outcome is the same.
No, but it's not. It's just a factor. It's not it's not coercion. Like the employer isn't coercing the person to work.
No, but I'm saying. Yeah, no, I'm not saying the employer is forcing anyone to work, right?
Wait, hold on. Wait. What I'm hearing here is that the free market system or the what do you call it, Austrian model or whatever,
Austrian method.
It doesn't feel like it takes into account those moments where that lady that needs to feed her kids. It doesn't feel like it takes that into consideration.
Oh, it totally does. It totally does. Like for example, the lady. What if Dairy Queen wasn't there? For example, in your example, what if there was no Dairy Queen? Well, I do.
Remember that first paycheck coming home and asking Daddy who the fuck FICA was, and why they were taking
that's probably American. So.
income. Like
Question was just like,
motherfuckers who work at
you're
McDonald's
distorting
for
the term
trains to
freedom
work at McDonald's.
if you say it's the same.
No, there's a free market, and then there's coercive market, right? If Dairy Queen wasn't there to hire that woman, she'd be even worse off than if it is there, right? Is that true? Assuming that's
So
the only employer?
I see the opposite. So for me, there's markets. There's no difference between markets. There's just markets. But then there's coercive situations that can characterize a market exchange, and then there's a situation that can characterize a voluntary market exchange. But the markets themselves are not the ones who are coercive. It's the conditions that are like the preconditions to the exchange that characterize something as coercive. Right,
but that's nothing to do with the market. That's to do with this person's condition. Like that's like the part of being alive. You need food to live. That's nothing to do with Dairy Queen.
What I want to do, but what I want to do is I want to increase the amount of free exchanges in markets. Right. So what that means is that I want people to have the freedom to exchange voluntarily in market behaviors without having coercive constraints. Right. So I don't want people to make decisions on a market that are based on whether they want to live or not. I want people to make decisions on the market free from coercive forces, right?
Well, the thing is, you can't take away the.
And it seems like you're not concerned with that.
No, I am concerned. I want the best for all people, right? But the problem is, let's say you coerce Dairy Queen to raise the minimum wage or the wage for this woman, right? I don't know. Maybe that'll be a solution.
Yeah. Then
okay. So now it happens.
I mean,
now it happens.
In some situation, I'm sure the woman would be better off.
Hold on. It's not that. What we're talking about is that. What we're talking about is the moment that individual drops off the end of the market. So if she loses her job, for example, like right now she's searching for a job, right? Well, what is there to catch her, to prop her up? Like that's where I'm coming at with this.
Well, before we had families and church organizations and all these other things. Unfortunately,
yeah, but now everything relies on markets to
no.
Just for basic survival.
Well, what we've done is we've taken away like our sort of community based supports, and we've offloaded that onto the state,
which is what they want.
Yeah, why wouldn't the state want more power?
The thing is too.
I mean, again, the state is owned by the public, right? Like,
no, it's not.
From a child to
it is
buy into this structure of where she needs to have babies. Okay, so once you have people and you have people to take care of responsibilities, okay, your job situation in Fort changes. Okay, so like people who grow up in impoverished cities and inner town cities, like they don't have the opportunities that middle class Americans have. You know what I mean? Like. It's like starting a race, but you get a half-mile head start. You know what I mean? So, like, she trapped herself in. To be successful in this fucking system, you've got to go into debt. If you ain't $50,000 in debt, you ain't fucking doing nothing.
Well, the thing is, what better way to keep people behind than to restrict the free market so that you can't have investment and development of infrastructures and production?
Because somebody's got to flip burgers.
Oh, yeah, sure. I mean, there's a... And you know, at some point, there's probably going to be no burger flippers. It's just going to be robots that do it. And that's...
Then what's she going to do? What's she going to do then?
Well, hopefully have a decent husband and family and other people to support her in her life so she doesn't get stuck in this situation.
But what we're trying to say is that the choices that we want to make in our political system, when we talk about democracy, when we talk about trying to make change in the world, like it doesn't feel like this free market has anything that's going to allow for someone to be able to bounce back to pull themselves up from the bootstraps as they say. You know, I understand that that's not the right way to put this, but I'm having a brain fart. So.
Well, like, I mean, I didn't start off very well off. I went through periods of time where I was like eating, instant noodles essentially. When my dad got laid off at one point, single dad, and I mean, but over time, I survived that, and then I got out in the job market myself after going through school, and I started off extremely poor. Almost all my income went to rent, and I had a kid when I was really young. Then had more kids, but I kept keeping my nose to the grindstone. I showed up to work every day on time. I I didn't do any drugs. I didn't go excessively drinking. Like it was hard, but like I made it, and I don't see how it's so hard for everybody else. Like they could have done the same. But
No,
people make different decisions.
Whoa. Slow the F down.
Yeah, sure, go ahead. I want to hear your retort.
Okay, so people who don't have access to resources to help them get further. Like I'm the same thing, dude. I had 8 brothers and sisters. We lived in a 3-bedroom trailer in fucking Mississippi. Okay, I still managed by 25 to get an associate degree from Ole Miss. All right, so I get you. I fucking done it. All right, I sacrificed. Okay, but like, all right, so many people have done that, and the jobs aren't there. You know what I mean? Like when I worked for the EPA for 7 years, and they cut 80% of the EPA's funding when Trump took office. And guess what? I was looking for a job. I went from making $35 an hour to back in kitchens and fucking flipping burgers for $10 a fucking hour because the jobs weren't there in environmental science field anymore.
That's not even to mention all of the people that probably grew up in the same area that didn't get to go to school, get to go to college.
Yeah,
right.
I didn't go to college.
Well, I mean, or dropped out of high school for whatever reasons that they're.
I dropped out senior year when got a GED, did my SATs, fucking scored good, and fucking applied for Ole Miss.
But you're coming at this from the standpoint of from your life experience, but we have to take into consideration that there are people out there that don't have any of the opportunities that you have, let alone ones to pull themselves up with. There are people out here that can't even function, that literally can't even function. And we're what I want to be able to say to these people is that, hey, you're going to be taken care of. All right. Now you're trying to tell me that the free market is going to account for this, that there will be a market for this. But my point is, like, if you're trying to make policy, the reason that our system does work as much as it does, the fact that it's a representative democracy in that regard, is meant to portray the difficulties of each environment. And that's you can't just come at it like, well, you should have tried better, you should have done harder.
Dude, that's 80% of fucking America, man. They don't understand it's musical fucking chairs. Okay? The poverty is built into the system. There's always going to be somebody left out. Okay, what if you got up tomorrow and all your needs were met? Food, clothing, shelter. We have the technology right now. No one should be hungry, but we still use half the world's grain to feed cows that only feed 20% of the world's population. It's fucking stupid management of fucking resources. Okay,
but you're never going to get perfect
technology
management.
right now. We have the technology between geothermal, solar, and wind and tide that energy should be free. Okay, we have the technology right now. Nobody should be homeless. Okay, nobody. But those technologies will never be put into place if you can't make a profit. All right, so that's why the profit structure has to go down if you want to end poverty, if you want to end world hunger. Like, you've got to get away from this. Well, if they can't pull their bootstraps up and make something of themselves, like I did, they can do it too. That's not caring about your fellow man.
No,
because the technology exists right now. Nobody should work that hard.
No, even if the technology exists, it doesn't mean the infrastructure's there.
Well, then that's what we're talking about, right?
Well,
it's getting away
so here's the
from
thing.
the monetary system.
The question of infrastructure, though, is just a question of like resource allocation, right? Where we put the financial resources. Yeah.
No,
I mean, for example,
first, let's define infrastructure. Do you think a shopping mall is infrastructure?
No.
I mean, yes.
It is. Yeah. It has to be, right? You go there to buy stuff. If you didn't have it, you'd have to go walk around.
System.
Well, we're working on the current system. So shopping malls are infrastructures. Do you ever see a government make a shopping mall?
I mean, I hope not, because they're fucking terrible.
No. If I'm thinking of infrastructure, I'm thinking of hospitals.
I'm thinking of water.
I'm thinking of roads.
I'm thinking of electricity.
No,
roads,
infrastructure is everything,
direct taxes.
Sure, fine. Infrastructure is everything. But when you come back down to it, like the free market is supposed to be making the roads in with no regulation. Well, maybe you end up with bad roads because they want to make more profit. Like, that's the kind of shit. But I mean, how do you know that?
Because I've
You-
been to
you say
places.
that so
I know, but
glibly.
I've been to places where they have private roads, and the private roads are like the best roads there.
I mean, no, it's the opposite, right? Private roads have like tolls, and it's really long. There's wait ups, there's like line ups, right? It's a terrible system.
Oh,
right?
you could have better systems. I'm not saying that the system's perfect. You could have like subscription. You know, there's in Brazil there's toll roads, and you just have this little like detector, and it detects your car and just lets you through right away. You basically don't stop. But you know,
But-
if you
but-
have
but-
to pay with
okay,
coins,
so-
you gotta stop.
But
Yeah, but
again,
yeah, whatever. Yeah, but
you get. I keep hearing you generalize this in a way where it's like, well, but it shouldn't be regulated. So like, if we have a market for road building and road construction,
Mhm.
that it shouldn't be regulated.
Yeah.
Well, to what degree? To what degree? Like, there's got to
Okay.
be some kind of regulation, right?
Okay, so if you build a bunch of shitty roads that fall apart, that's a bad investment for your company that makes money by
All right, but when
leasing
you
the
say
roads.
that, the roads are going to fall apart because there are people doing bad investments, and people are going to die from it. And that's what
Well,
we're like.
don't use
Why
those
do you not
roads.
see that?
Well, that's why you have like rating systems and stuff. Like you don't go to a restaurant that has friggin' 1 star. You go to the restaurant that has more
Jesus
stars.
Christ, people do that. We're eating fucking McDonald's because it's fucking readily available.
Yeah, man, but that's
It's
also a
dollar
good
burger,
thing.
dollar burger.
it's not a good thing though. But okay.
It's a good thing. Well, it's better than starving to death, isn't it?
Yeah, but
I
again,
mean, you're not
that's
wrong
not
there,
the
but
option,
here,
right?
but here's where we're talking about why profit is incentivizing in a bad way, because McDonald's could be trying to improve their food quality to a degree where it's not going to affect our health negatively, and they could be trying to innovate in a way that makes it as cheap and readily available as it is now.
But,
But
dude,
it's
they're
not
gonna-
doing
they're
that
not
because
making-
it's more profitable for them to
No, no.
continue feeding us.
I mean, this is the same. We're just talking about externalities, right? So how do we solve externalities in market settings? That's what we're talking about.
Well, the free market will solve them.
But again, that's objectively false, right?
Well, no, because McDonald's doesn't make special. You don't see McDonald's making like roast beef dinners, right? Is that what you want?
No,
but
man.
Then what do you want?
What I'm saying is that when you talk about this, you say that okay, well, the market's going to work itself out, right? Well, that's natural selection, is it not?
No, it's not.
How not?
Well, because there's all sorts of other forces that interact with people, not just the market,
All right.
right?
So when you say the market, the market is going to work itself out, like that means that parts of the market have to die,
No.
and other parts so that there can be growth.
And obviously,
No.
you were on the right side of that flux, that change, okay, that was allowed you to thrive, okay? But there are people out there who were not on the upside of that change, all right? Those are your poor people. Those are the people that, almost was there and then fucking lost it all.
Oh, yeah. So the thing is with the market is that it doesn't. You can't. There's no such thing as a perfect system, right? You have to ask compared to what, right?
That's why I want to implement something we haven't tried before. That's what I'm saying. Like
but that
it's
like
addressing
okay,
cancer.
okay,
You're talking
okay.
symptoms. You're trying to treat symptoms and not addressing the cancer.
Like I always give every credit to the fact that the system, the capitalistic system that we have currently, is benefiting millions of lives. The vast majority of our population is greatly supported by the system we have right now, right? But for some reason, there are people falling off the end of it. All right, do we agree on that small assessment?
I don't. I'll qualify it first, okay? I don't think
Okay.
it's capitalism that's causing them to fall off the end. But I do agree there are people falling off the end.
Look. I don't care what you call it, but we have a current system that is tangible. When it comes to monetary and economic, socioeconomics, right? You can see it right in front of your eyes. I'm talking about that system that we have that you are interacting with on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Is allowing people to fall off the ends. Correct.
And I'm saying the part that's allowing people to fall off the ends is not the fault of the free market, but the fault of the state.
Okay, well, this is where when you're saying that you're always going to have this inherent flux that causes people to fall off the end.
But it's their fault.
And I get that. Like, I don't disagree with that. That's an inherent thing. All right. But what I'm suggesting is that it seems that it is possible somehow through some kind of economic wizardry or just the technological advancements that we have in our capabilities currently, we could keep those people that fall off the end from severe trauma because due to that.
Well,
whether that's
what's
huh?
keeping. I just want to ask, what's keeping these people poor? And I'm assuming they're fully willing to work and they're fully capable. What's keeping these people poor?
Ignorance, access to knowledge.
Any others?
I mean, that's a pretty good damn answer.
Well, there's a lot of socioeconomic, the systematic racism in different places.
Somebody's got to dig ditches. I don't want to do that shit.
Okay, so according to the free marketers, right? The reason why these people, so these guys are motivated to better their lives, right? Let's assume.
Okay.
So they're motivated to better their lives, and that takes them having to act, right?
Okay.
So what's preventing, and they're willing to act, but something's preventing them from acting. How does a free market prevent a willing actor from taking action? Logically.
Okay, so let's say you're working in Detroit, during the height of the automotive processes going on there, and suddenly steel takes a hit in the market, right? Because you were getting it from China to begin with, and now they're gonna suddenly add some economic tariff or something along those lines. Now you lose your job. All right.
Okay.
So that has very little to do with government intervention on behalf of your government. It has everything to do with the free market trying to get resources from another area, and suddenly it hits a snag, and now your job was not prepared to take an economic hit of that level.
It's like
But this person's still willing and able to work, right?
Right.
So why isn't there a competitor in some other industry, perhaps, or the same?
Because the only name in town gobbled up all of the other businesses in the area that were doing the same
they're
thing.
innovating. You don't need people anymore. Jobs are getting harder and harder to come by. Good ones anyway.
So where I live in Canada, there is a massive labor shortage, for example, and there always is. There's been a labor shortage here since 2002, basically, and before that it was really bad when we had a socialist government. And Post-Scarcity would probably disagree.
Who is the socialist government? Sorry, I was
the NDP.
zoned out for a second.
The NDP.
The NDP. Yeah, that's not socialist.
Well, I was an NDPer for a long time, and I was a socialist involved with them. At changing levels over time. Like at one point, I was, Vaush. I was basically like a Vaush before Vaush existed. But for me, not all jobs are perfect. Obviously, I prefer the job I have. But I mean, I could shop around. I could move cities. It would be expensive, and I'd have to save up money to do it and stuff. I mean, I see the point. I see your point where people get sort of the knees cut on
prohibitively. It could end up prohibitively.
Yeah, man.
Expensive.
But how prohibitively expensive
Dude,
is it for a guy?
I lost a $300,000 house and 4 cars when I lost my job with the EPA.
Yeah.
All right. You know what I mean? Like, you got to understand how fragile this fucking system is, and the variables and how easily it can come tumbling down. Like, you know what I mean? Like, is it my fault? Are you telling me it's my fault that Trump cut 80% of the EPA's funded and I lost that job?
No,
well, no,
I'm not saying that.
You're agreeing with him right now.
Right.
Like what he's trying to say that the government involvement in jobs, and in the free market is part of why you lost your job, and not only that is why everyone's losing their jobs. So
But I just thought America said it was their fault. Like, what's stopping them? It's environment. You're a product of your environment. There's things you can control and things you can't. Things that happen out of your control, it's not my fault that, I didn't make it to that fucking American dream with white picket fence and 3 fucking kids. You know what I mean? Like, it was literally luck of the draw. It's musical fucking chairs.
The thing is, with the musical chairs thing, I just see that as a little bit. I mean, I understand where you're coming from, right? But that's kind of like the idea that the economy is sort of like a fixed pie. I think, if I'm incorrect, please correct me.
I'm just saying the poverty is built into the system.
Well, I don't know if
It's like if you seen Snowpiercer, the difference between the motherfuckers at the front of the train and the back of the train.
Yeah, I know, but I mean, that's not. The thing is, like, that's like a closed system. Like, we live in a much more open system than in Snowpiercer.
I mean, we do live in a closed system, right? We live on a closed loop, like, ecological planetary system.
Yeah, sure, yeah, okay. Yeah, that's true. But at the same time, like, there's a lot of opportunity out there. I mean, you gotta chase. It's hard to chase leads and stuff. I know what it's like having to look for a job. Like, I had a lot of pressure on me when I was younger. I had two little kids to feed, and
Look, we know there's a lot of opportunities. We get that.
yeah,
Like, you're talking to people that are making it in the system because we know how to make opportunities. But when those opportunities are too few or non-existent for particular individuals, or they've made the wrong choices, like what we're trying to look at is how best to serve, them and help them get back into the market.
Well, let's just give you an example. You remember that guy that was selling single cigarettes and he died tragically? The black fellow. Well, he was doing free market exchange, and what happened? Well, the state came down and decided, hey, you aren't following the state regulations, and they killed him. Now, what that guy was doing, in my view, was he was reselling product at maybe a higher price because he was given it because of the convenience. So you get one cigarette instead of having to buy a whole pack.
He was hustling.
Sorry?
He was hustling.
Yeah, he was hustling. So he's out there making it. Now, when I went to Brazil, well, in Canada, anyways, let's go there first. You never see random guys with coolers on the side of the road selling beers, right? One, because the state has made it illegal for you to drink beer on the street. Even if you just have one, you're not drunk, right? Two, you have to have some sort of health endorsement from the health ministry or whatever, the local health authority, in order to do that. And three, you have to get a permit from the city. Those are very cost prohibitive. And now everyone loses because I can't just go walk down the street and have a beer casually.
Move to New Orleans.
Yeah. This guy can't make a living because he can't afford to get over those barriers, and the system has to spend money, which is actually tax money on enforcing it.
Here's a counterpoint to that. Then here's a counterpoint.
Yep.
So, what if the law that they put in place there saved 1 million lives?
Well, I mean, yeah, I guess if it did, maybe.
It was racially driven. They would have found.
Hold on. I'm just asking. I'm asking a simple question. All right, so. Let's say that just the one regulation of hey, you can't sell the beers on the side of the road individually like that,
yeah,
or something along those lines, right?
Yeah,
you're regulating that, and again, this is hypothetical. I'm admitting that this is hypothetical. It saves 1 million lives.
Sure, yeah.
So what? How do we work between the idea of trying to protect lives and have the free market?
Well, you have to look at the stats. Like, I mean, first of all, you got like the base
empirically
the beer that everyone sells. Well, the thing is, the beer that everyone sells in Brazil on the street is Heineken, basically, or a well-known national beer. So, like, there's regulations already on those companies, so, like, what's the point of putting extra regulations on this guy that's on the side of the street? I mean, he could be poisoning the beer, and you could have 1 million people die per year. I highly doubt it, and I'm pretty sure no one would buy beer off the street if that were the case. So it wouldn't even need regulation in the first place, right?
Can't tax that. Okay, like, you ever notice that the only drugs are legal are the ones they can tax?
Yeah, I mean, there's additionally this, but the state's always going to try to get taxes.
You got to get away from that. Taxation is death.
All right, I think I'm gonna head out soon. I'm getting pretty sleepy here.
Yeah, no worries. It's pretty late over there. Thanks for coming, man.
Yeah, no problem. And
we'll
conversation.
We'll try to do it another time again, maybe when you when you're not having to sleep.
Yeah, no, it's fine. I mean, I don't know
Yeah,
how
we did
long
it.
you guys.
We did it in the morning, or kind of close to noon the other day, and that worked out pretty well.
I mean, we did a solid 2 hours. I don't know. Like, do you guys usually do longer?
Oh, the first one was about. We just did 4 because we were just rambling on, but the next one was probably about an hour and a half. Just 2 hours is good. It's no problem. If we go, we might not go much longer, but if you got to go, it's no biggie.
Yeah. Anyways, yeah. Good chat. I think I'm gonna go. But yeah,
All right, take
keep
it
on
easy.
keep on chatting. See ya. Bye.
Cheers, Post.
Well, we can keep going.
Yeah, I'm down. I can go for a little bit more. Yeah. So,
All right, screw you and all of your views. No, I'm just kidding. Sorry. I yelled.
No, it's alright. It's alright. Yeah. So, like, I mean, I'm not against. First of all, I'm not against necessarily. Like, I know our systems are kind of already set. I'm talking sort of like ideally, and the thing about talking ideally is I have to take into account the factors that are sort of manipulating the system as it is, right?
Right, and
Well,
that's
what we're talking about doing. We're talking about better ideas and how to get there from here.
Well, I like to think about principles. So, like, if I steal money from you, is there any situation where that is morally correct?
Wait. You're talking about justifying robbery?
No, like, say, like, I come up to you, I say, give me all the money in your wallet. Let's say it's $40, and then you obviously don't want to do this, but you do it because I intimidated you with violence, right?
Right.
So you do it. Is there any
short answer? Short answer is no,
Okay, how come?
because there might be something that this money could be used for that benefits humanity.
Well, first of all, who earned that money?
I don't know.
Well, the person you stole it from.
Okay, yeah,
So who deserves that money?
that person.
Okay, so it's wrong to steal from them, right?
Yes.
Now you can come up with other scenarios like, okay, well, I only did it because my family was starving and I had to feed them, and I couldn't think of a better way, right?
Okay.
I thought he wouldn't give it to me if I asked nicely, right? Now
Justified. You can justify it, yeah.
you can justify it, and maybe society goes, you know what? Although it was wrong and you need to pay him back, we're not gonna like punish you harshly for this, right? But those
Right.
are two different things. They still see the theft as morally wrong because the person didn't, the subject didn't deserve it.
All right. Where are you going?
Okay, so what I'm going with this is taxation is theft. It's legalized robbery.
Okay.
So now I know you did mention before about becoming more sustainable than like trying to avoid taxation, basically. Like, and I think that's
Well,
awesome.
it's more like so the whole idea behind it is that, like, if we're trying to, when you think about like all of the monetary, economic, and all of these other systems, a lot of them boil down to the word resources, right? And even if you think of time as a resource, it expands on that idea that
Oh, it
what
totally
we're
is.
talking about is well, I mean, but what we're talking about is how do we manage these resources effectively? And my goal is that, like, well, if we're going self-sustainably, then we're reducing our impact on the resources. If we're growing our own food in our own house, we're reducing our impact on the agricultural system.
Reprogramming your society not to be a consumer either.
And so it's like we can still have like steaks from a cow,
Not
and we could also have the Impossible Burger for those that don't want to eat the cow. Like, we can have both. We can innovate to make these things better and better, and we can still have our agricultural system, taking care of a large portion of the population in the form of, like, well, corn and wheat seem to be in just about every product we eat. That's supporting a giant portion of the population, nutritionally.
Yeah.
Or at least just like keeping them alive at the very least.
Yeah.
Well, what I'm suggesting is that if we're more conscious about how we spend our money, if we're more conscious about what we're supporting with our money, then we can start to manipulate those markets to benefit us better.
Well, here's my like. I used to be a socialist, right? So the reason I was a socialist is because I thought, okay, well, we can somehow reorganize the deck chairs on the Titanic, and we can prevent the suffering, right? Now, I'm just using it as a joke, right? But then I realized, oh, but this is the Titanic, right?
They're all going down.
We're going down no matter what. Everyone's going down. But what we can do is we can try to like throw out lifeboats, right? And try to get to another ship and all this other stuff. But you can't. But if let's. You can't just rearrange the chairs and think you're going to have a better system. What you need to do is you need to expand the infrastructure. So that would be like the lifeboats or whatever. Now, if you're just rearranging the infrastructure, that you're never going to get ahead. You have to expand it, and that.
Well, see, that's the thing too. Is I don't think you can just do it by changing infrastructure or expanding on infrastructure. Okay, the current system has to fail. You're talking about reprogramming, social engineering, social stratification of a whole society, like training people not to think they're a fucking individual, to realize that I am you, you are we. And if I base my decisions on what's good for you and it's also good for me, instead of basing them on what's good for me and my greed and this consumerism and this fucking system, okay, things start to change.
But the thing is I can't get inside your head or the 300 million American heads and make decisions for them. I can only make decisions for me, and you can only make decisions for you.
Well,
Right,
I'm just
and that's-
saying decisions in Congress should be based on intellectual management of resources based on the carrying capacity of the earth.
Well, I think
That's
that
what you base your decisions on.
I think Congress and the state should all have their power reduced as much as possible. And
I'll make it straight up. I don't want to base anything on anybody's opinion. I want to look at facts. I want to look at people who are trained to solve problems making our laws instead of good old boys who win popularity contests. Which,
okay, well,
I'm sorry, man, but they're puppets, man.
Oh, I agree, but I talked to Crippled Assassin about this. Was it this week, right, or last week? Anyways, about how experts, right? You advocate. The thing is, let's say you think about any subject. What's the subject? Physics, right? So let's say you're not a physicist, so your physics understanding is like a 1 out of 10 or a 1. Let's call it a 1, right? And a physicist, their understanding might be 100, right? In comparison to you. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So who
okay.
makes the decision?
Well, hold on. But the corpus of physics as a subject is like 1 million or 10,000 or something like that. So even though that guy is 100 times more than you, in terms of like understanding the whole reality of physics, it's actually very, very small.
All right. So the things we know today, we won't know tomorrow. All right. So when implementing this is where you do away with the borders and you think of the earth as one, and you're always implementing the highest technology. You're not there's no competition. You're just always applying the best technology because we have problems, we innovate, and then guess what? There's another problem. Okay? And innovation is what makes your life better. Automation.
But how do you motivate people to act?
All right, so like I said, the caveman didn't need money to invent the wheel. You know what I mean? People have this big thing about money being the motivational drive. You know, people solve problems. They don't always, I solve problems every day. I don't always use money. But, if you create a law, you're saying you can't solve the problem.
No.
You know what I mean? If there's a bridge that says icy when wet, instead of printing up 1 billion signs that say slippery when wet, put an adhesive down that keeps it from freezing. Solve the problem.
Well, the thing with like the idea with the caveman, right? He didn't need money to invent the wheel. So why did he invent the wheel?
Because he needed to tote more than one rock at a fucking time.
Exactly. So he's creating value by he's actually
solutions.
Well, yeah, he's increasing his infrastructure, right, which has a value to him, which he doesn't have money because that doesn't exist, but his material wealth and material well-being has increased because he's more productive, right?
Well, that's what I'm saying. He didn't need money as an incentive to do that.
But
You understand what I'm saying? The incentive was the ease, the betterment, the betterment of your existence.
But that's all what money's supposed to be. Money's just an abstraction of value so that you can use that value to do the same thing, like buy a wheel, you know?
Yeah. Well, that's the thing is, in this society that we dream of, the wheels are free.
Well, but who made
Everybody
the wheel?
can have a fucking wheel.
But who made it?
Well, you know, somebody over there is making wheels while we're over here making food. It's intellectual management of resources. What are your resources around you allow you to build?
But that's just what money does. All money does is just aggregate that into a dollar amount, and then so you can easily transfer it.
You understand, it's an extra variable in the fucking equation. You can simplify the fucking equation by just taking it out. It's a barrier between you and the resources.
It's not.
You know, when we need a hospital, who's going to pay for it? Do we have the resources? The only question you should be asking.
It's money's an innovation because it allows you to not need a coincidence of needs, right? Like if you don't, like let's say you grow berries and someone else makes wheels, well that maybe the guy doesn't want berries, he wants beef patties, and you only got berries, so but you want wheels, so you're kind of screwed now. You got to trade the beef patties.
What if the making of wheels and the growing of berries and the growing of food was all automated?
Well, of course, but that's massive infrastructure, and I'm totally fine with that. But that's just another cost, right? That'll take time.
Well, I mean, no, because in my system, nobody's working.
Well, yeah, that's great, but we need that infrastructure first, so that needs to be built.
Yeah.
So I mean,
how do we get to there?
Well, that'll in my view, that'll happen naturally through market forces. Eventually, so let's say, for example, right? Why things are expensive because it takes energy and action or whatever. People need to be paid to do the thing, and that's why things are expensive. If you can lower that cost to nothing, then or you know nearly nothing, then things won't be expensive. And one of the ways you can do that.
What is the connection between this idea of? I'm sorry, is it Austrian?
Austrian school is just a methodology that prefers a priori logic instead of empiricism, on the basis with the argument that empiricism cannot measure the future, and so it's useless for making real economic predictions.
Oh, okay, all right. So that's not what I'm talking about then. Okay. So the idea of this free market then. All right.
It's perfect for finding out what you could do, though.
Oh, sorry, Austrian.
Well, yeah, like it's used with logic, right? Yeah. So it's experiments. Okay, we don't know what the future is. That's what we're trying to find out. And if we don't like the outcome, we change a variable. So we find one we like.
Well, it's based off human.
It's like process of elimination.
Austrianism's like human action, right? So if every time you do something you get punished, are you going to do that more or less?
Depends on how much of a smart ass I want to be that day.
but generally, like you want to not get punished, right?
No.
Okay. Yeah. So the Austrian method's like, okay, so if we do this, so you have to. Well, a lot of people get caught up with this idea of ceteris paribus. So ceteris paribus just means isolating for a single variable, right? So, because the thing is, you can't if you look at everything all mixed together, it's just going to be too confusing to calculate for. So what you do is you isolate each variable, calculate for that, and then what you do is you put all those variables together, and then you have to kind of estimate based on how each thing will impact the outcome, right?
The hypothesis.
Yeah. So, but first you have to calculate all those different things through logical questions. For example, if I talked to your buddy about this earlier this week. If I ask you, do human beings act, right? Now you can answer yes or no. Now if you answer yes, well then it's true, and also if you answer no, it's true, because if you answer you've acted, therefore proving that human beings act, right? That means it's.
I see your little parable there.
Because so it's sort of like a self-reinforcing knowledge. It's like a priori. It proves itself true.
Right.
So from that basis, the Austrian school builds like a system of sort of questions and isolations that slowly build up rules for how you can create a system that would maximally motivate people. It never says anything unrealistic. It never says, oh, you know, it never gives it gives you like an ideal, but and it'll explain why certain things happen the way they do. And what it also does, it reveals the propaganda behind a lot of the systems that we do experience already. Like, for example, the 1929 crash, a lot of people are totally propagandized to think that that was caused by a lack of regulation. But the truth is, it was caused by...
Was that when they did away with the greenback and implemented the Fed?
I think, was that in 1913? I think that was before.
That was the question I was going to ask.
Was
Well,
that...
see, that thing is my recollection of what happened was J.P. Morgan and other associates put out a rumor that the Central Bank of America was failing. This caused people to go in and try to pull out all their money. All right, and this is what caused. You got to think about it. Every dollar in your wallet is owed to somebody by somebody else. If everybody starts taking their money out of that bank, all right, they don't have the actual tender on hand to pay everybody. And this is what caused the collapse and the scarcity and the need to put in the Fed. But believe it or not, the Fed is nothing to do with federal at all. You know what I mean? Like that's another word like free in market that is misleading.
Which actually leads to the question I was going to ask you that I forgot.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you have the free market in this way that you're talking about, how would it relate to the central bank?
Oh, it would there would basically be no central bank.
All right, so let's say for example,
ideally, of course.
Let's say, for example, that America is able to pull together and say that, all right, we want to unregulate. All right, well, what ends up happening is that we would have to pull away from the central bank, but the central bank would still be there. It would be in England and London.
Every time somebody has filed bankruptcy on the central bank, there's been a world war. Fact.
Well, how about this? How about there's no central bank, and you're allowed to bank with whatever the hell you want?
No. But we're talking about reality, though. It's there.
Okay, so what are you trying to say?
Okay, so even if America comes together, pulls its shit together, and says, "Hey, we want to unregulate. We want to utilize a free market to achieve our means of being self-sustainable." All right. Let's say we're putting everything together, and it looks great. All right. Well, now we have to pull away from the central bank because we are a part of it.
Oh, you mean like the World Monetary Fund or whatever they call it?
Like,
IMF, the WTO.
When COVID first happened, I was like, why isn't the government issuing its own currency instead of letting the litigation and the Fed and tax rates, all that affect when people are getting their stimulus? And like, you know, each state could technically print its own money in times of need. You know what I mean? Like,
well, you could a local bank could print their own money.
Yeah, but the first one who does, I'm telling you, somebody's gonna fight.
Oh yeah, no, I agree because that's the central point of state power.
Right. So this is where the reality comes in, because even if we do try to create an unregulated free market and we try to pull away from the central bank, we have to now use our unregulated market to interact with the rest of the foreign entities and nations, and I say entities because that includes, the IMF, the WTO, the Bank of America, the central bank, the ones that the Rothschilds have owned and operated for decades now.
Yeah. Okay, so let me give you an example. So, like, why is Bitcoin valuable?
Because it takes time to mine, and it's encrypted enough that you can't fake it.
You can't.
It's unregulated.
It's unregulated. It can't be counterfeit, right?
Right.
So so the difference between Bitcoin and the dollar is that the dollar is regulated and it's completely counterfeit.
Exactly.
So, what's the first thing the government's going to try to do to Bitcoin, but it won't be able to?
regulated.
Exactly, and they're going to fail. And this is probably going to be where something happens. I don't know what's going to
Well,
happen.
see, I keep saying this. The current system has to fail for the new system to take place. Okay, so this whole thing where we print money up at the trillions, we're selling away our grandchildren's fucking tax, life. They're the ones paying back this debt, not us. You know what I mean? Like, when it fails, either the new tyrannical government is going to take hold and move in, or the people are going to put something in place that's better. All right. And we're the ones that's going to decide. Either we're going to go right along with the tyrannical government, or we're going to be right there with a plan to implement something better.
Well, here's a cool one for you. So imagine the dollar. Imagine like the government allows other people than the Fed to print money, right? So right away, that money's not going to necessarily have value. But what you'll have is like say Pennsylvania decides they're going to have their own dollar, and then Washington State's going to have their own dollar, and California too, and they all base it off, and it's all backed by actual savings of say like gold bullion or silver, right?
Right.
So those are real savings, and then they use that, and then what happens is those. So the relation between the currencies is based on the relation between the actual physical bullion they have in storage. So
instead of debt.
Yeah. So what happens is they can't print money off, because if they print money off, they actually are creating a bubble. So because there's only so much.
Yeah, but the money don't have to though, because the money you have will become the worth increases.
Well, let's just let me follow my point here. So let's say you have let's say the state of Washington has $1 million of worth of gold, and they print off therefore $1 million of paper money, right? So
Yes.
so that means that dollar in Washington would be completely funded by the bank, right? Now, let's say California, for example, does what we do, is where we have it's not backed by anything, right? And they can lend it out at 10 to 1, right?
So it's a debt-based money system.
Yeah. So California goes for the debt-based money system, and Washington State goes for the gold-backed currency. What will happen over time is, as the debt-based money system moves, right? As it moves through time, you get massive inflation, because the money's not actually backed by anything; it's backed by coercion.
It bases the worth of the dollar, stealing
Yeah.
the resources from the people.
Exactly, and all the people that
Alright,
had
so-
savings. But if you had Washington dollars, they're guaranteed to be maintain their value, because they're backed by
This
gold.
is why we fought the Revolutionary War.
Yeah. So now now what happens is the government just has $1. There's no competitive currencies except for outside the world, which are coerced against by the government of the United States in some fashion or other. And now look at your dollar. What can you buy with it? Like, you take $1 50 years ago, what could you buy with it compared to now?
I ain't paying 75 cents for no Coke.
Now,
Was that a Caddyshack?
yeah, now, look at the price of gold. And if you take an ounce of gold back in 50 years ago, and you converted that into currency and then bought something, and then compare that if you had an ounce of gold now and convert that into currency and buy something, there's not much of a difference.
You want to know why they do the inflation to debase the currency?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, so they've already got the Asian Union, the European Union. They've put in place the euro, the Mero. No, the Mero is what they want to implement here. Okay, so you have three countries. You have Canada, you have America, you have Mexico. Now, Mexico's money isn't worth shit. All right, Canada's money is worth more than America. America's in the middle.
No,
you have
we're-
to
ours-
base
ours
the
is
currency all to the same value to implement the new gold. So it's all relatively the same worth when you implement the new standard.
Well, I think there's actually a way to actually solve the problem within the system as we sit, at least to be better. We first at least in Canada, what we could do is we could stop printing money, except for to replace bills that are damaged, right? And if we did that, we would experience deflation on our savings, right?
Yeah.
So that would mean that people that took the time to save money would actually be worthwhile. Then that money in savings account could be loaned against 1-to-1, which means it actually has a cost, and then that money can be invested in markets and infrastructure and such. As it sits now, what happens is we print off money, it creates this bubble, so this false reality that everyone thinks that, oh, look how big it is, right? But then there's nothing behind it. You pop it, and then you see what's actually behind it, and there's nothing. So then that's where you get things like the 1929 stock crash, the 2008 housing bubble. Those are all caused by things like this, where access to loans or access to currency is far beyond the actual capacity to carry it.
So like, even if you want to start any of these deals, my suggestion is that we start somewhere along the lines of trying to bolster our healthcare and our abilities to live self-sustainably. That way, when we start to, transfer into these new systems, our citizens and workforce are able to support not only themselves, each other.
All right. First thing we got to do is undo this law that gives corporations the right as a person, an entity, and can donate as much money as they want to campaign funds. You got to get the corruption out of the free market, because you got to understand is if you don't let the free market act like it's supposed to act, when you go bailing out companies, when you go bailing out banks, when you do, you're propping up a system. When this system, it thrives on change, innovation, and change. You got to let it fail so something better can take its place.
Well, I mean, I think we could eliminate the politicians by just taking away their power in the first place and make it more local.
Yeah, definitely. And like I said, put people in charge who are trained to solve problems.
Well, I don't even know if that's necessary, because, like, let's say, for example, we have a strong centralized government run by experts. That's like an absolute recipe for disaster. It's much better to
Well, look. Hold on. What we're talking about is, like, you're still going to have a prison system, right?
Oh, ideally, I would just make a prison island
Right.
and put mines around
All
it.
right. So who's running the prison system?
Well, no, you wouldn't even have to run it. What you do is you get this island that no one else wants, and then you put everyone there, and it just becomes sort of prisoner island, and you can even make money off of it to fund it. Yeah. Well, I wouldn't, do Australia. I'd do some island that's out there that no one lives on.
No, that's how Australia came to be.
Oh, I know. Yeah, I know. They all
prison
had sent. Yeah, prison colony. But so you could make this. My idea would be you make this prison island. If you are no longer able to function in society because you've done a bunch of crimes, which you've done basically voluntarily, then you get put on prison island, and then you have to try to survive there. And there will be no law enforcement on prison island. They could even market it. They could put like cameras and like make it a live TV show or something. I don't know.
You're a sadistic bastard.
Hey, I'm just trying to save money. I mean, some crimes you can be reformed from, but some like let's say you strangle kids or something, like there's no coming back from that. I don't really care if they get the chair, but I mean, I think prison island's more moral.
Well, this system promotes crime. This system promotes, taking away your freedoms. That's what they want to do.
Well, I think we should. I think we should get rid of all crimes that are not that don't hurt. That there's no victim, right? So like drug crime wouldn't be a crime. Speeding tickets wouldn't be a crime. Like, there wouldn't be speeding tickets, and other such things.
Well, every fucking car's got 120 on the fucking dash right there. You know what I mean? Instead, stop making cars that go that fast. Hell, stop giving DUIs and just make the car drive me home. And we can do away with those laws right there.
Well, I just think if you don't hurt anybody, like if you don't hurt anybody but you get punished, then you're the victim, essentially.
True.
So I mean, like I think those laws are totally unjust. Like I get why they're doing it, but I just think it's wrong.
True.
Now, if you do something like I threaten you, and it's credible, then you have a right to not be threatened, right? Or put in danger. So in that sense, I have committed a crime. If I punch you, obviously that's a crime. But if I say I bleeped your sister last night, and then you get your hurt feelings, that's not a crime. You know what I mean?
What are you figuring on him for?
Sorry?
Nothing, man. I just figured you fucking his sister. You're obviously friends.
High five.
Come on, bro. You knew I was gonna fuck your sister.
But yeah, yeah, I don't. I kind of jokingly advocate for Prison Island. I think it would be a fun TV show.
I'm down, bro. It's Mockingjay all the way.
I mean, imagine the ratings, right? Like, I mean, it would be people that are voluntarily there, right? Because they did the crime, they do the time. Oh, and you could.
I still like the lottery scenario. I think that for that scenario, it should be a lottery.
Well, I think they should be able to get out after they do their time. I even think they should drop, food packs for them and stuff. Like, if it were really cruel, we could make them hunt the deer and stuff or whatever. I just think people.
Can we make them naked?
He said, "Can we make him naked?"
Oh, I mean, I don't think we should give them clothes. Like, the thing is, if you violate societal norms and morality, and by harming other innocent people, then yeah, maybe you don't
But
deserve.
who decides that?
Well, let's say, well, a judge, obviously. So let's say you punch a guy out and like it's proof and all this other stuff, and the guy gets sentenced to Prison Island. Then I'm assuming that under normal.
I just don't trust anybody to decide who's wrong or right when laws were passed that made the fucking Holocaust legal.
Well, that's what I mean. Like, you couldn't laws like that are, to me, are bad. Like, laws that make victims of innocent people shouldn't be in law.
Yeah.
On that same principle as the Holocaust.
What do you think of the Patriot Act?
Oh well, the Patriot Act is like ridiculous. I think it should be canceled. I think America's.
Have you noticed the similarities to the laws that were passed before the Holocaust happened? Huh?
Yeah. Oh, actually, I think America sold a little bit of its soul when it decided to put that law in.
Hey man, so I've been listening to that
Give
book.
their freedom.
That book you told me to read, the Road to Serfdom.
Oh yeah, I have it right here. Oh
Yeah.
what-
So I'm probably like I'm probably about halfway through, I'd say.
okay.
But I did want to give you one other small bit of homework.
Okay.
Check out the podcast Congressional Dish, and listen to you can go through the episode list, and it'll tell you. It gives you just a little title and then kind of a small description.
Was it
But go through
Congressional
there.
Dish?
Congressional Dish.
Okay. Was there a specific episode?
No particular episode. Just in your own free time, go through that list and see if there's anything that catches your eye, and take a listen to it. There's numbered episodes, and then there's thank you episodes. The thank you episodes are just her thanking her producers because she doesn't take advertising from any companies. She's doing the value for value method, where she only takes donations from her listeners, and that makes them producers. So if you hit an arbitrary goal, which is 535 in her case, you become an executive producer, and that becomes something that like she will vouch for you if you try to credit yourself as an executive producer. You know what I mean?
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
I just looked her up on Wikipedia. Is this on YouTube? Just for.
I don't remember. She's got a website. Just the Congressional Dish website has all of the episodes right there.
Okay.
Yeah, you can listen to any right straight off the website.
Okay, I'll look for that. Oh, I see it is on. Well, she's on YouTube anyways, but I don't know if it seems to be here, but it's not very big. So I'll look on their website. I wrote down my little notepad here. I'm taking some notes.
Yeah, so my deal is, I'm using that and whatever other resources I can to try and keep informed of what's going on, and she does a great job because a lot of what she tries to do is what she's not seeing talked about in the media. So
Yeah.
like when Fox News and CNN and MS, and all those other media places are talking about this and that, and like, oh, this and that in Congress. She's reading the bills. She's reading the bills and listening to the hearings and listening to what the politicians themselves are saying. And that's what I really like about her. Like, she's biased, but she's biased against both political sides. She's
She's
kind of
cynical.
Huh?
She's a little bit cynical about them both.
Oh yeah. You'll definitely hear her. You know, like she's getting like in the past like couple like year basically that I've really been listening to her. I've listened to her basically have emotional breakdowns on on in audio, like on her deals, like talking about how pissed she is at what our politicians are doing.
Yeah.
What they paid.
So hey, hey Wizard,
Yeah.
do you know about the website I told Crippled about, the books?
No, tell me.
It's I'm gonna say it all weird so that YouTube doesn't pick it up. So it's
Okay.
it's www dot b dash okay dot cc, and it's basically like a free library. You can get basically any book you can think of,
Oh, nice.
and even ones that are really hard to find. What was the one?
Yeah.
There's this one I was reading. I'm gonna pull it up because it's like it's called the Machiavellians, and you can't find this book for less than $1,200, but it's really good.
Yeah, I got a book like right now. It's about the Navajo skinwalkers.
Okay.
Actual accounts of a Navajo woman who was plagued by them and how she, I guess, battled them. Is that what happened?
This-
And this goes from my own experience down in Taos, New Mexico, which is Pueblo, not Navajo. But it's literally the only literature I've been able to find.
Hmm.
And it was last published in like 91. And like every copy you see, it's like a fucking cardboard back. Fucking, they put this together at the fucking library. You know what I mean? Like
What's it called? The Skinwalkers?
it's I gotta look it up. I don't remember the name of it, but it's a pretty expensive book to find and hard to find.
I bet you they have it. I bet
I'll
you
get
they
back
have it.
with you on that.
Yeah.
Hey, I want to say something real quick. That book you have me reading, I found it on YouTube for free.
Oh, well, there you go.
I'm listening to it in audiobook.
Okay, cool. What do you think of it so far? Like,
Well, I mean, let's see here.
Don't ask me yet.
Yeah, that's a tough question so far. I gotta get a little farther in.
okay.
I mean, the thing is to make a logical decision, you got to always be accepting new information and putting that into the equation.
Oh, for sure.
So, if he goes to, duality on it now, he might not finish the book.
Yeah, no, I'm just wondering. There's another book. It's pretty short. I want to recommend to you. It's really short. It just kind of gives a basic overview of like the Austrian school, and the only reason I recommend it is because it'll make it really easy to talk about it basically, and the more you guys know about it, the more I can talk about it, and
Has this system ever been implemented?
it can't be because it where it's been implemented, it's worked in as much as it's been implemented without interference. But the problem is like politicians change their minds and then they just do things for power. So, but
See, now here's the thing: is, I mean, that's the same thing that we see when they try to do any socialist system. Like we run into the same issues.
well, no, it's not. It's not that they're not taking power by doing the Austrian method. They're taking power by doing non-Austrian things, like going against Austrian recommendations.
Yeah,
So-
but what I'm saying is that like it's getting corrupt from the inside, and that's the same thing that happens, like to any other economic system that we try to implement.
Well,
And that's my thing too, is that if it's a different system that hasn't been tried, I'm all for it. Doing the same thing over and over again is fucking stupid.
Well, that's why I think maybe you should read about it because I don't. It hasn't been implemented because, unfortunately, unfortunately, it just hasn't. People haven't done it because it's takes away power from politicians, and who gets in power? It's politicians, right? So
Well, I mean, it's like the Martians experiment, New Harmony, Indiana. You know, like it needs to have a model that's set up. Let's run this as an experiment. You know what I mean? Because that's the thing is like you have to change variables. And we've changed variables, we changed variables, we changed variables. The one we haven't changed is the monetary system. It's been implemented for over 5,000 years in some form or another.
yeah.
All right. So I'm all about a new system.
Well, if you look at stable currencies, like for example, the Swiss franc, it's a lot more stable than say like the American dollar. Or
the Swiss franc, yeah. You know that whole Luxembourg thing is those are part of those banking families that fucking monopolized. You know what I mean? Like it's a revolution has ever happened every time the price of bread has gotten too fucking high in France. All right, we know this.
Yep.
We know from the Greeks and Romans that if you keep people fed and entertained, shit goes smoothly.
Yeah. The thing is, it's not hard to do that now. Now we have a problem with feeding people too much.
People so worried about what's coming on football, the gladiators of the day, you know what I mean? And like that shit's wrestling. You know what I mean? Like I saw fucking they didn't call fucking pass interference against the Saints. They didn't go to the fucking Super Bowl. Had 3 fucking refs staring at it. You can't tell me somebody went in their ear telling them not to call it. It's fucking wrestling. You know, you can't tell me it's a coincidence that the Patriots have won almost every Super Bowl since 9/11. You can't tell me it's a coincidence that, you know, Saints won after fucking Katrina. It's an economical play. It's a.
I used to think that too, but I mean the Buccaneers won, and it seems like the Patriots won because they had Tom Brady now.
Well, I'm still saying they inflated them fucking balls, man. Like they're, you know, when you got the refs and the NFL as a whole behind your back, you know what I mean? They can manipulate how a game goes.
Well, I used to think that about Canada is all about hockey, right? So I used to think that about the NHL because my team is the Vancouver Canucks, and they would always friggin' lose, and it was always like, you know, they'd be up 2 goals and in game 3 after winning 2 games in a row. And then all of a sudden they lose that game, then they lose the next 3, and then they're out. And every year
well, that's
it was like
Detroit. Hockey, it goes hard, bro. I don't think they're manipulated as much as other sports.
Well, I used to think
I mean?
I used to think it was manipulated. I don't think anymore, but maybe I don't know. I'm not really. I do pay attention to football, but not really that much, you know. So I mean, I'll leave that to your expertise.
No. I gave up on it a few years ago because I realized it was. People get up every day and they come into work and they regurgitate the shit they saw on ESPN the night before. They don't have their own fucking idea. You understand what I'm saying? They don't have their own fucking opinions. They come in and they just regurgitate what they fucking hear. And this is when I realized that people are fucking stupid. They can't form their own opinions because if people don't like it, they're ostracized. They might be made to feel weird because they thought that way. So they're only safe to regurgitate what they've already heard, somebody else's opinion. Who, you know, so 2/3 of the population is never going to wake up to this. You understand, right? Well, like 2/3 of the population isn't smart enough.
Do you know about Edward Bernays?
Hey, I've heard the name.
He wrote. I think he wrote this book called Propaganda, if I'm correct.
Oh yeah, I think I read that in college.
Okay, well that's basically like what's happening, and you seem to understand.
Yeah. I mean, I was a literature minor and a philosophy major, and then halfway through I changed it to environmental science.
Okay, yeah, I almost I've been thinking of getting a bachelor's in environmental science because I don't have to do 2 years, but now I'm like, oh fuck it, that's not worth the money.
Yeah. For me, it was just to become a facility manager at any water treatment facility. You have to have some sort of degree.
No way. That's what I was thinking. That's kind of what I work with a little bit.
Oh yeah, I treated water for water and wastewater for what I did is I had a region, and I would go and pull samples behind municipalities to make sure they weren't pistol whipping their numbers.
Oh yeah, no, I don't do much anymore, but part of my job I do samples to make sure we're not pouring chemicals down the drain.
You're more industrial.
Yeah, basically, yeah. It's like industrial wastewater treatment. But
that's a whole field by itself.
Yeah. It's fun to do though. I found, but you know.
Learning about. I enjoyed learning about it, like sequent batch reactors versus like anaerobic and aerobic digestion
Yeah.
and reduction of solids. And I love playing with the sulfur dioxide, removing chlorine out of water after you dose it to kill everything, and then getting it in the right parameters before you dump it into the stream behind you. That it's not going to affect the lot. Everything in wastewater is there except for oxygen. The more you pump in oxygen, you can speed up the process.
Yeah. What's the
Everything needed to treat water is there. Yeah.
do you know about the like what's it called, reverse flow rinse tanks or whatever?
You talking about black flow prevention? What are you talking about?
Well, it's like like in industrial, you have these you have rinse tanks for certain applications and they get dirty, right?
Right.
But it creates a lot of waste if you're just running water constantly. But you can do reverse flow where you put the work through the rinse tanks, and then as you add water in the opposite direction, so that the last tank's the cleanest. So, but then you just have like sort of a drip flow into that part, and then it overflows into the next and the next, and so you can reduce your water usage by like a lot. I don't know. It's just something.
Oh, wow.
It's interesting.
Yeah. That's it's kind of like using your gray water, like getting all everything out of your water before you send it to the septic tank.
Yeah. It's like using your gray water for flushing toilets.
A lot of weirs. It sounds like a lot of weirs.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, the more weirs, the better, but it takes up more space.
You know what a weir is?
like a holding.
It is.
cell, right?
It keeps solids. It draws water 6 inches below the water instead of the top, so nothing that's floating on the top can escape the tank. But the clear water, because solids settle down, and clear water comes up. So anything that comes under that weir can go be sent and like literally treated right there and put right back out. It's the solids that you have to
It's
reduce.
just a nice little like easy filtration with or a simple filtration.
So you have
just using the physics.
you have solids precipitators basically.
Well, back where I'm from, man, in Mississippi, it's drying beds were a big thing for a while.
Oh yeah.
We have digesters. So you have the aeration basin, and then you have the digester, and that's when you cut the oxygen off to the microbes, and then they start feeding on themselves to reduce solids even further.
Yeah. That's cool.
And then when you got it reduced as much as you can, you pull it out to a drying bed, load up the truck, take it to the landfill.
Yeah. That's cool. Anyways,
It's like, reverse osmosis. They don't have that in fucking Mississippi. You get out west, it's fucking everywhere.
So I'm gonna wrap it up soon, guys, just because I gotta go to bed at some point too. But yeah, do you want?
We're
do
in the same boat.
Yeah. Do you want to add anything else before we go?
Add me on Facebook.
I don't have Facebook. I hate it.
How are you going to like my band page then?
Well, I have Twitter.
You have Spotify?
I don't have Spotify now.
You have iTunes Music?
I do have. I guess I must have it because I have an iPhone.
Yeah, Apple Music. Go like my shit on there. Mississippi Murder Revival.
So Mississippi. I'm bad at spelling. Fuck.
MISSISSIPPI.
There we go. Mississippi
Murder Revival.
Murder. Brado?
Revival.
Revival. Okay, sorry.
It's like CCR, but it's MMR.
Okay.
Cletus Clearwater Revival, but it's Mississippi Murder Revival. Let's play on that.
Okay.
Check me out.
Yeah, I'll check it out, man. I like CCR.
Hey, man.
Well,
I'm nothing like that.
Yeah, it's not that.
It's not that.
Oh, okay. So, what was I gonna say? Are you're from Mississippi?
I'm from North Mississippi, and I've been in New Orleans the last 8 years.
Okay.
And I just moved to Denver a year and a half ago.
Okay. Did you ever go to Arkansas?
Yes.
Do you know Yellville?
Is that north?
Yeah.
East?
At North Center, I think.
So up near Cabot?
I'm not sure. I
Is that
have a family.
Sugarloaf?
Yeah. Sorry.
Sugarloaf?
It's right south of this city in Missouri, I think. It's called like a pretty famous. I'm just
Oh,
looking.
it's like on the border.
Yeah,
That's way up.
Yeah, I'm just trying to find it here. I'll tell you in just a second. It's looking. I have a family grave there. That I want to visit one day. Yeah, it's south of Branson, but like, yeah, there's Harrison and Flippin, north of Marshall.
Yeah, that's way north.
Oh, okay.
Cabot and Sugarloaf is a national park, but it's literally halfway from Little Rock.
Oh, okay. I see.
I think that's the farthest. The only other place I've been into Arkansas is northwest Mount Pettyjean's, fourth largest cavern in the world.
Oh, okay, that's cool. But yeah,
Vacation there when I was a kid.
but I have this ancestor that he was in the Civil War, I guess,
Uh-huh.
and he had a most of his family was on the north, but
Right.
he happened to find himself on the south during the war, and he took on this farm that had like a whole bunch of like this big ass farm, and he actually had slaves, which is pretty messed up, but he sold them in New Orleans near the end of the war, and then he buried the gold on his farm, and I don't know where
It's never
the
been found.
and it never been. Well, what happened was after the war, because he was involved in like providing nitrates to the South. He went to prison, and only him and his wife knew where it was buried. And he was pretty old at the time, and his wife was old too, and she had died while he was in prison. And so when he got back, he was kind of demented too, and he claims he forgot where he buried it. But I know where the farm is, so I'm like hoping one day I can go back there and maybe put some black kids through college or something. But that'd be pretty.
I've got this idea, man. Nobody ever talks about the mass genocide of the American Indians. People think genocide, they think of the Jews. I think they had it right. I think we should start giving the land back to the indigenous people. At least do away with fucking Columbus Day. Come on. Bullshit.
Yeah, I don't know. It's hard to see with past things, like it's so my kids are partially native, and I'm not native at all, but I live around a lot of natives. The thing is like a lot of people are so mixed. It's like, well, part of your mix might be like, Columbus is cool, and the other part is okay, maybe not. So
Well, I mean, once you know it's a lie, though, like, why do they keep teaching that lie when we know it's a lie?
which part?
The fact that Columbus discovered America where people already lived.
Oh, well, that has to do with for example, if the Chinese had found California first, they would have called it, it would have been it wouldn't have been in Columbus, it would have been like Zhihao or something like that, and maybe they'd be celebrating that instead. It's just the way they looked at people in North America. They looked at them as if they were like less advanced.
Savage.
Yeah, they called them that. Easily subdued because their technology was like not as advanced.
Yeah, but it could just have easily gone over here and discovered people who were more advanced.
Yeah, it could have, but that's the thing. It didn't. Like, for example, the Anglo-Saxons, like when they invaded Britain, like the Celts basically got like wiped out, like basically forced to the corners.
Yeah. And two, Leif Erikson came to America long before him. Like, there's been other people who's even found this place. They pulled up a Viking ship up in fucking Michigan.
Yeah, there's a place in Newfoundland, I think, that they have a village actually.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, but I mean they didn't stay, I guess, so they didn't really keep as good records. Yeah, they might have went down all the way down the coast there, but I don't know how far. But the thing is, like, the past is sort of, in my view, it's like dead, and the best we can do with it, the worst we can do with it is dig up the bones and cry about them and do ceremonies with them.
Man,
but
history repeats itself, man. This is why I thought that the next president was a woman. Because black men had rights in this country before women did. Right?
Yeah. Well, Actually, it's funny because like people talk about like like the UK.
Yeah.
Women didn't get to vote until like the 1920 or something.
Yeah.
Well, the majority of men didn't get to vote till 1920 either. The only the
House of Lords, huh?
well, no,
What are you talking about?
men didn't get the right to vote until the draft in World War One, unless you owned property and were above a certain age. But women,
It makes you a lord.
but
You
women
own
were
property.
no, not necessarily. You could own property as like a merchant or whatever. But like women, the reason why women didn't get the vote because the vote was contingent on your draftability and into the army, and
Women weren't allowed in the army.
and when they did polls, women actually didn't want to have the vote because they didn't want to get drafted because it came with this provision. So do you know what they did? They gave them the vote and took away the provision that they needed to be drafted, and that's how they got the right without the responsibility.
Yeah, me and Major were talking earlier about industrial revolution, and the countries that had it first have more regulations than third world countries who are just now doing it. You understand what I'm saying? So,
Yeah.
um, this is why we have all these regulations. This is why our quality of life is better because we found resources and we bought those resources and then we refined them and then we created factories and then that now we're in a system where it's information. We sell information. It's like Home Advisor. You call them and you literally pay them for leads. You know what I mean? Just like possibilities.
Well, the thing is, regulations, like if you look at the places where growth's happening the fastest per capita, it's in these third world countries because they don't have regulations.
There are no regulations.
Yeah, it's easier to do
But
things.
these regulations came from like people getting hurt on the job. You know what I mean? We learned.
Well, mostly because the regulations mostly came out because people wanted to monopolize.
True.
There's no better way to do it than that. Like, oh, it's safety. It's for safety, but really it's because they don't want a competitor to come out and interfere with their business.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's
I like how guilds are, not guilds, like labor unions are really like the guilds of the Industrial Revolution. Like most people named Smith come from a long line of blacksmiths. That's because you were born, your father was a fucking blacksmith, right? You couldn't really change your stars.
yeah.
That whole thing with democracy and freedom, you were able, the opportunity to change your stars exists now.
Well, the thing is, there was that advantage gained, but at the same time, like when your father was a blacksmith and you knew you would be one too, you sort of had like you knew your place within the great chain of being, and when that was sort of done away with,
Is that easier than trying to figure out what you want to do? Maybe.
well, yeah, but
People
I mean,
love being led.
there was always that opportunity to like, you didn't have to be a blacksmith. It just was like the best opportunity you had. And a lot of people cry about the fact that they don't have all the opportunity in the world, but it's like the world's not here to offer you opportunity. There's this quote from Lord of the Rings. Do you know this movie?
Oh yeah, I love Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, so there's this awesome quote. It comes from Frodo says to Gandalf, why does it have to be me? Like, I don't know if I'm ready. I don't know if I can take this burden. It couldn't have been someone else, right? And then
It's actually classic fucking archetype
yeah.
formula. I mean, to be honest.
And then Gandalf's like, we don't get to choose the time we live. We just get to choose what we do with the time we're given.
Oh yeah. See, I'm more of a determinalist. I believe in prophecies. I'm a precog. I dream shit and it happens. You know what I mean? So I believe technically it's all already happened. The future is a fucking memory. Technically, it's all happening at the same time. Actually, but this is where I am in perception. As far as what's the one thing you do whether you're conscious of it or not? You turn oxygen into carbon monoxide. What does a blood cell do? It's a refractal repeating pattern. When you look at a telescope, you see a universe. You see a center mass with swirling around it. You look at a macroscope, you see a center mass with shit swirling around it at an atom. It's a refractal repeating pattern. Okay? And free will and choices and this thought, why am I here? This is all just entertainment while we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. every time I talk to somebody, there's an energy exchange. We both want to take away something. You know what I mean? Like, that's a successful communication, energy exchange, a good meeting, good talk. You know what I mean? Like, if somebody got we both walk away with something.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Well, fair enough. Well, it's interesting for sure. There's a lot to explore out there.
have you ever read Oedipus Rex?
No, I've never heard of it.
All right, so Oedipus Rex is he was prophesied that he would kill his father and bear children by his mother.
Oh,
right.
Okay, we call it Oedipus. Oedipus here.
All right, so that story has a second play. It's the children of Oedipus. Okay, this is actually portrayed in Dune as a parody. The House Harkonnen and the House Atreyu. These houses go down, become Troy. All right, when Troy falls, the children of Troy leave. They form Remus and Rome and fucking Carthage. Right, so this bloodline has literally been coming down based on all prophecy and the curse of that prophecy.
Yeah, no, it's interesting, man. I'm sort of I look at history different than, like, I don't look at it like the mainstream does either. I try to, what was really meant by how would people really react to X situation, right? Like, I try to think about it differently, but I don't. It's just for fun. I don't know if it's what I'm coming up with when I do that, but.
Well, see, I have a lot of thoughts too that never go anywhere. And this is why me and Dimitri really get along. It's because I can throw ideas off of them, and it don't matter where they go. All right, so like, and this philosophy and stuff I've been working on, like, in this 6 months that I've known him, has progressed in such a way because he's asking the right question, and every time I have to explain it, I explain it just a little better, and it makes a little more sense.
Yeah.
And that exchange, I feel like that's why he's even here in my life, is to help me forward, my story and my journey. And he does a good job of making me think and explain things in different perspectives so he can understand it.
No, that's cool, man.
All right. Not that he has to accept it or believe it. Just be open to the idea, because in metaphysics, like in the realm of possibility, I'm wrong and I'm right.
It's the mark of a mark of intellect to be able to entertain an idea without having to believe it.
Yeah.
I'm pretty awesome like that.
Well, see, ideas can be changed. Beliefs cannot be changed. You try to change somebody's belief, they want to fight.
Yeah. All right. I'm just gonna end.
Ideas.
I'm just gonna end the stream. I'll keep talking, but I'm just gonna end it. So.
Yeah, go ahead and end it. I gotta go to bed.
All right.
It was nice meeting you, dude.
Okay.
Nice talking to you.
Hey, too, man. If you want to do it again sometime, just let me know. Get your buddy to send me a message there.
Will do.
Good night.
And same to you.
All right.
And same to you, Assassin. Cheers.